Chapter 1. Naruto walked out of the academy, muttering under his breath about stupid clones. While he was walking, he saw his instructor and another teacher talking to each other. Naruto ran up to him and asked, "Hey Sekiten, Sensei, can you help me with my clones? They always look like they're dying when I do the jutsu." Sekiten answered with a fake smile, "Sorry Naruto, but the year is over. You will have to wait until next year." "But what am I going to do for the next 2 months?" Naruto asked. The Chunin thought for a moment and said, "How about this?" while reaching into his weapon pouch and pulled out a scroll. "This is a fuujutsu scroll. Work on this over the summer," handing the scroll over to Naruto. "What's fuujutsu?" Naruto asked with a confused look on his face. "It's the sealing arts. Have you ever wondered how some of the teachers get weapons out of scrolls?" The teacher asked. Naruto nodded his head and Sekiten continued, "That is fuujutsu, and even the Hokage knows some fuujutsu. The fourth was a fuujutsu master." Naruto, hearing that his idol was great at fuujutsu, was more than enough for him to accept the scroll. "Thanks, Sekiten. Sensei, I'll master this scroll in no time," Naruto said as he started to walk home, leaving the two Chunin by themselves. The Chunin with Sekiten asked, "Why did you give the demon that scroll?" Sekiten snorted and answered, "Like that brat could learn the sealing arts. It's one of the hardest arts to learn." His friend nodded. "I suppose you're right. Even I have trouble with the basics." "Come on, let's get out of here," Sekiten said as they two left the academy. Naruto ran all the way to his apartment, holding onto the scroll tightly. When he got to his apartment, he cleaned off the table in his kitchen of all the empty ramen containers and opened the scroll and started to read. Naruto read the first 2 feet of the scroll and got out some ink and paper. The scroll suggested that Naruto practice calligraphy before getting into drawing seals. The scroll had an example of some words written in calligraphy, so Naruto gave those words a try. It was about an hour before Naruto decided that while his handwriting wasn't too bad, he was going to have to work on it. Naruto was going to need a book on calligraphy. He would have to go to the library, but he knew that the old bat that ran it wouldn't let him in. But lucky for Naruto, stealth was one of his best skills, so that shouldn't be a problem. That night, Naruto was able to get a few books on calligraphy, and he started to practice. His handwriting wasn't that bad to begin with, so it took about a week before he attempted his first seal. The first few days were frustrating as he would look at the scroll and draw the seal, but there were small mistakes, so when he got his first storage seal to not blow up on activation, Naruto was ecstatic. With that, it only took another week to learn all that the scroll had to offer. Now that Naruto had mastered that scroll, and the library didn't have any more on fuujutsu for some reason, he was headed to the Hokage's office. When he got there, he said hi to the secretary, a young woman who was always nice to him, and walked into his Sarutobi Jiji's office. Sarutobi greeted Naruto as he walked in and gave him a break from all the paperwork. "Hello there, Naruto. How can I help you today?" Naruto smiled as he sat in one of the chairs and said, "Hi, Jiji. I came to say hi and ask you something." "What is it you wanted to ask me, Naruto?" Sarutobi asked. "Well, I started to learn fuujutsu, and I was wondering if you had some books I could borrow," Naruto asked. Sarutobi looked a bit surprised and asked, "Really, Naruto? Fuujutsu is a very complicated and dangerous art to use, if not used right." Naruto took out the scroll that his teacher gave him and the one he made. "I got this scroll from my sensei. He gave me this scroll after I failed to make one of those stupid clones. It was pretty easy to do, and I even made this other scroll to hold all my weapons in, demonstrating by poofing out a kunai." Sarutobi asked, "So you have only had that scroll for 2 weeks?" Naruto nodded, and the Hokage thought for a moment. "That is pretty good for someone how just started. Maybe I could give Naruto his parents' fuujutsu books. They have some of their notes on them. It could help him a lot." The Hokage got up and went to a storage room in his office and moved some boxes to where a safe was. After entering the combination and some quick hand seals, the safe opened. In the safe were several scrolls. He took them out of the safe and went back to his desk. He tossed the scrolls to Naruto, who nearly dropped them. "What are these?" Naruto asked as he looked at the white scrolls with the numbers 1 through 4 on them. "A friend of mine likes seals, and these are his scrolls with his notes in them." The Sarutobi said, "You can have these." "But they aren't mine," said Naruto. "The friend I'm talking about is no longer with us, and he would want someone to learn from him. Sealing was one of his best arts," Sarutobi said. Naruto thought for a moment and said, "Okay, Gigi, I'll work as hard as I can to master fuujutsu and make you and your friend proud." Then ran up to his Gigi and gave him a hug and said, "Thank you." "Now, Naruto, about the academy," said Sarutobi. "You will be put with your age group next year. I think we were getting a little ahead of ourselves, sending you in 2 years early." "Okay, Gigi, I better go so you can get back to your paperwork," said Naruto. The Hokage looked at his paperwork that seemed to double in size since he last looked at it, and sweat dripped. "All right, Naruto, be sure to be in room 213 at the academy when the break is over," Sarutobi said. "See you later," Naruto said as he ran out of the room. Well, their son would take an interest in seals. If this pans out, we could have another seal master in the village, Sarutobi thought. Over the next month and a half, Naruto studied the first scroll, which had 15 books in it. He got through the first 2 and was working on the third. He even thought up some new pranks with the seals that he knew. He went to class early on his first day to put what he had learned to use. Naruto got in, and there wasn't anyone there yet, so he got to work. He got done with only a few minutes to spare, so he sat down in the back of the class and waited for the show. The class began to fill up, and as the bell was about to ring, Naruto's new teacher came in. He had brown hair, tan skin, and a scar over his nose. "My name is Irika Yumino. I'm introducing myself because we have a new student with us today," Irika said, and everyone looked at Naruto. "Why don't you introduce yourself?" Naruto smiled at getting all this attention and said, "Hi, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. I like ramen, fuujutsu, and pranking. I don't dislike many things, and my dream is to be Hokage." Naruto said the last part with excitement. Irika frowned a little at the pranking part, but smiled at what Naruto's dream was and said, "That's a good dream, Naruto, and you have a lot of work if you want to reach it, and please don't pull any pranks in class." The grin across Naruto's face wasn't a good sign. "I can't promise that, Irika, sensei," Naruto said. Irika sighed and went to pick up some papers on his desk, unknowingly triggering the seal that was under it. The next thing he knew was that all but his head, which was blocked by the papers he was picking up, was covered in orange paint. There was an outline of him on the blackboard. At this point, most of the class was snickering, and Naruto and Kita nearly fell out of their chairs. To say the least, Naruto spent his first attention after school. It had been 3 months since Naruto started in his new class. He quickly made friends with Choji and Shikamaru, but for Naruto, class was as boring as ever. If you sat behind him, you could see that most of the time he had his textbook open. There was a fuujutsu scroll in it that he was reading. This caught the attention of Sasuke's twin sister, Sasasha. What about fuujutsu had him so interested? And there were the pranks he was pulling. The paint launcher was just the first. He had transported a bucket of eggs onto their other teacher's, Mizuki, head. He had also been able to cover Irika in feathers that were sealed to not come off until the chakra in the seal ended or Naruto canceled the seal. Within a half hour of that, one Irika caved with letting Naruto off of punishment to stop the snickering. Sasasha wondered what about seals had him so interested, other than the pranks that he was pulling. She thought that fuujutsu was just for sealing items and making bombs, but apparently that isn't all it could do. And today, she was going to find out more about their new classmate and his interest in fuujutsu. Saizasha noted that the last few days Naruto had been going to the training grounds after class, and she was going to find out why. That day after school, she followed Naruto to the training grounds. It wasn't like anyone was home waiting for her at home, and her brother was too busy in his own world to notice that she wasn't there. When Saizasha got to the training ground, she saw Naruto checking over 2 ceiling tags that were about twice as big as the standard explosive tag. He set them up on 2 trees in the training area, and she hopped into a tree, wondering what they were going to do. Naruto touched the tags for a moment. They glowed blue for a moment, and he stepped back. He unsealed a windmill shuriken and threw it between the seals. The moment that the shuriken got in between the seals, they shot out blue tendrils and caught the shuriken. Naruto was about to jump for joy when the seals overloaded and blew up. Saizasha was so engrossed in the jutsu that when it exploded, it surprised her and she fell out of the tree that she was in. After she hit the ground, she groaned and slowly got up. Naruto saw her and said, "Who's there?" Saizasha came into the field where Naruto could clearly see her and said, "Hey Naruto." "Saizasha, what are you doing here?" Naruto said, recognizing her from class. "I was wondering why you found seals so interesting, so I decided to come and see what you could do with them," Saizasha answered. Naruto looked at her confused and said, "Why didn't you just ask? It wouldn't be that hard to tell you why I like seals." "Okay, why do you like seals?" Saizasha asked. "Well, at first it was to kill time over the summer after the academy last year, but when I started to learn I found out all that a seal could do," Naruto answered. "I mean, if you're advanced enough and know the right sealing formula, you can do jutsu without hand seals." Naruto finished excitedly. Saizasha thought of the advantages that could give her and the fact that Naruto didn't use hand seal for his pranks. That would be a great advantage in a fight, Saizasha thought. Maybe he could teach me something on seals. "Naruto, could you teach me about seals?" Saizasha asked. Naruto was stunned for a moment. He never thought she would say that. He thought that she would just nod and walk away. She normally only talked to Hinata and Hanabi, the Hyuga twins, and these conversations were normally brief, never lasting too long. Naruto didn't know that they were the only people she could have a decent conversation with. All the other girls were fangirls of the last Uchiha. Even Yamanaka heir Ino was a fangirl, and that disgusted Saizasha. Naruto answered about 30 seconds later and said sure. He was happy to have a new friend and someone to bounce ideas off of. Naruto pulled out the first scroll he got and tossed it to Saizasha. She caught it, and Naruto started to explain to her the basics. Over the next month, Saizasha got to know Naruto after school, and he would help her with the basics of fuujutsu. Most of the month was spent in the Uchiha library writing seals and getting better handwriting. Naruto looked through the library and was amazed at all the books, but disappointed when the fuujutsu portion was so small. Over the next month, there were times when Saizasha would get frustrated with Naruto for his stupidity, but after getting to know him, she realized her mistake. It wasn't that Naruto was stupid, it was that he was ignorant from basically raising himself. Therefore, she decided to help out with that. When he had those moments of ignorance, she would help explain things to him and let him use the Uchiha library. They got along well and would spar once in a while when Saizasha got frustrated with seals. She was even able to help him a bit in his taijutsu. She also introduced Naruto to Hinata and Hanabi. Naruto was happy to have some new friends and help them learn seals too. Even though Naruto was confused as to why Hinata got all red and fainted all the time. Saizasha, on the other hand, found it hilarious and teased the poor girl when they were alone. Saizasha decided to keep Naruto ignorant of her feelings so she could have more fun. Naruto was able to explain to different levels of fuujutsu users. They were all at the beginner level in SEALs, which is just be able to understand basic formulas. The next level is an expert. They can deconstruct basic and intermediate level SEALs and can start to make some more challenging SEALs. The next level is a journeyman who in the old days would travel from place to place studying SEALs to broaden their knowledge. But now there are lots of sealing books, so traveling isn't always necessary. Then there are SEAL masters who can deconstruct all kinds of SEALs and have at least 5 SEALs of their own making. So now that they were training together, they made a schedule for what they would do throughout the week. So it came to studying SEALs Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They spar on Tuesday and Thursday, and they study whatever they want on Saturday with Sunday off. This was the routine for the next 6 months. In those 6 months, they all got quite a bit stronger. Naruto was almost done with the 10th book in the first scroll, and his taijutsu got better, finding that the hard fist style was a good fit, even if he bastardized it a little. He also got to know elemental jutsu when he saw Sasasha's fire style, great fireball jutsu. He hadn't learned any, but is reading some of the different kinds. Sasasha was getting better at seals, but not even close to Naruto's level. She could use basic chakra seals to lock doors and scrolls, trap seals, and pretty good explosive seals. They were more advanced than the ones sold in most ninja stores, so she thought she was doing pretty well. Her taijutsu was getting better too, but what do you expect fighting 3 opponents at once? She learned 2 or 3 new fire jutsu, but was working more on her seals. Hinata and Hanabi were at about the same place in seals, with the exception that Hinata was also working on healing seals. They both got better at the Hyuga fighting style. Hanabi was still better at the fighting style. With Hinata having the better chakra control and working with her friends, especially Naruto, her confidence went up a little. They both were able to turn on and off their Byakugan without hand seals by the end of the 6 months. It was a Friday after school, and everyone but Naruto was at one of the more forested training grounds, as they had just found the tree waking chakra control exercise. Hinata was already at the top of the tree, and Hanabi and Sasasha were making steady progress. Hinata sat on one of the taller branches looking down, asked, "I wonder where Naruto-kun is." "Probably working on that seal that we saw last night," Hanabi answered. "He was working on it pretty intently last night." "I hope it isn't anything dangerous," Hinata said. Sasasha snorted, "Like we could do anything to stop him." Hanabi nodded at that. The Hokage couldn't stop Naruto when he's working on a seal that he is fixated on. Hinata sighed and nodded her head. Naruto could be quite stubborn when he was working on seals. At this moment, Naruto ran into the clearing and had one of the biggest smiles on his face that they had ever seen. He looked for them for a moment, spotting them up several of the trees, and ran up to them. "It's finished," Naruto said. "So what is it this time?" Sasasha asked while hanging upside down on a tree branch. Naruto was about to speak when he closed his mouth and took out a seal, placed it on the ground, and the field glowed blue for a moment. They recognized the privacy barrier. It was a round barrier that went about 20 meters from what they saw. That was an improvement over the last time they saw him make this barrier. They wondered what Naruto was going to show them. "What is the new seal you wanted to show us, Naruto-kun?" Hinata asked curiously. Naruto stood up and said, "I'm glad you asked, Hinata-chan. You see, I made a seal that will help us with our training speed quite a bit." They all looked surprised at this, and Sasasha asked, "What seal is that?" Before answering, Naruto took off his jacket and shirt, which turned Hinata's face red as she put her hands over her eyes with an eep. That didn't stop her from looking through her fingers at Naruto. Sasasha and Hanabi, seeing Hinata's reaction, giggled a little, and Hanabi asked, "Not that Hinata doesn't like the show that you're giving her, but why did you take your shirt off?" Naruto looked confused at the first part, but answered, "Because the seal is on my chest." Sasasha looked amused at Naruto's confusion and the fact that he still hadn't figured out that Hinata has a crush on him. Sasasha said, "You still don't get girls, Naruto. Anyway, what is the seal?" Naruto looked between the girls, trying to figure out what the girls were talking about for a moment before shrugging and putting his hands into the ram seal and channeling chakra through his body. The effect was immediate as a seal appeared on his heart and stomach. The first one over this heart had a round center and a 2 in it. Then, around there was a bigger circle that had interlocking circles in between the 2 circles, and on the other side of that circle was a web-like design that went out 2 rows. He had another one on his stomach that looked like a sun that had a swirl in the middle that had 8 lines going out from that swirl. Naruto answered while pointing at his heart. This is the chakra absorption and resistance seals. The resistance seal will make us stronger and faster. The chakra absorption will take some of our chakra while we improve our control, and it will give us more back when we increase our control or get low. The other one I'm still trying to figure out. All I know for sure is that it isn't hurting me, have a lot of security, and is containing something huge. Interesting. So you're going to give us the chakra absorption and resistance seals to all of us, Sasasha asked. Yeah, Naruto said with a smile. It will take about an hour to put on the seal, and we'll be good to go. What do you two think? Sasasha asked. Do you girls want the seal? Hinata turned down a gift from Naruto and said, I think it's a good idea if it will make us stronger. Hanabi nodded her head and said, I think it's a good idea as well, but how did you put the seal on your chest by yourself? Naruto looked a little tired when she asked that and said, It wasn't easy, writing the seal from the reflection in a mirror, but I got it done. So Naruto, how do we get started? Sasasha asked, knowing this seal would be complicated. Naruto blushed a little and said, Well, I'm going to need you to take off your shirts first. Tatak, take off my shirt. Hinata stuttered with a shocked look and a huge blush on her face. Yo, you can't be serious. Naruto sighed. I won't lie to you guys. In order for me to give you these seals, I have to write them as close to your heart as possible. It uses your heart as a center point for the resistance seal to spread from, and the chakra absorption seal needs to be over one of the 8 inner gates to absorb the chakra from. So over the heart is the best place to put this seal. Naruto finished with a blush on his face. So putting it on our hearts will make the seal the most effective, right? It's not just you want to see us with our tops off, Hanabi said. Naruto nodded his head, and Hanabi, having no problem with this, started to take off her shirt. Hinata, shocked at her sister's action, said, Hanabi, what are you doing? Hanabi, not surprised at her sister's action, had not fully taken off her shirt, said, Naruto said it was the only place to put it, and I see no lies in his eyes. Hinata considered her sister's point and said, I don't think he would lie about this just to see us nude, but still, blushing harder at the last part. Naruto was about to step in to stop a fight before it started when Sasasha put a hand on his shoulder. She said, Turn around for a moment, Naruto. Let me talk to Hinata for a moment, and walked over to Hinata when Naruto had turned away from them. Sasasha walked behind Hinata and whispered in her ear, There's nothing to be embarrassed about, Hinata. It's just friends helping each other out. What if Naruto doesn't like what he sees? Hinata whispered as she fidgeted in Sasasha's grasp. Sasasha had seen what Hinata looked like under her jacket and thought, then he's either gay or beyond helping the intelligence department. She said, You have nothing to worry about, Hinata. You're beautiful, and in a few years Naruto won't be able to keep his hands off you. With a smile that grew the redder Hinata's face got. With Naruto, turn around, Sasasha got in front of Hinata and unzipped her jacket. Hanabi, figuring out what Sasasha was doing, got behind Hinata and pulled the jacket off. Hinata was frozen in shock that her sister and Sasasha were striping her in front of Naruto. Hinata had a body that most 15-year-olds would be jealous of, with a mid-high B cup at the age of 12. After that, her shirt and chainmail were off too, leaving her in only her bra. With that done, Sasasha and Hanabi took off their tops, leaving them in their bras also, which soon fell off too. Sasasha was a large A cup and quite proud of that, and Hanabi was just under her sister with a solid B cup. Sasasha got behind a still shocked Hinata and popped her bra off. Get ready, Hinata, Sasasha said as Hinata put her hands to cover herself as Sasasha called Naruto to turn around. When he did, his jaw nearly hit the ground as he got a good look at them. Hinata was covering herself with her arm, but he could still see a lot more than he usually does. Saizasha was beside Hinata with her hands behind her back, and Hanabi just had one hand on her hip waiting to continue. Saizasha saw that Naruto seemed to have frozen and was just staring at them. She smiled and said, "Do you like what you see, Invita-kun?" Naruto nodded his head slowly and said, wow, sorry for wow. Wow, what were we doing?" Saizasha said, "You were going to give us your new seal. That is if you remember it after looking at us." Hinata at his point was giving a good impression of a tomato, and Hanabi even had a small blush on her face. It was good to know she could make Naruto speechless. "Why don't you start with Hinata, Naruto-kun?" Naruto nodded and unsealed a futon so they could lay on it while he applied the seal. "Why, Hinata, please lie down on this while I get the ink ready." Doing as he told her, she laid down and tried to relax as her crush came over and knelt at her side and said, "Try to relax, Hinata, you're beautiful." Hinata blushed harder if that was possible and said, "Go ahead, Naruto-kun." Naruto nodded, and he got started to draw on the left side of her chest. She giggled, cause it tickled, and Naruto smiled and said, "It's good to see you smile, but try not to laugh. The faster I get this done, the faster you can put your shirt back on." Hinata nodded and let him continue. Saizasha and Hanabi looked at the seal being written. The first one was done in about 20 minutes, and the sealing language covered a little move, then half her chest. Naruto ran through a few hand seal and put his hand on the center of the seal, which was Hinata's breast. Hinata had never been so embarrassed, and it could have been her imagination, but she thought she felt Naruto squeeze a little. The next seal took about the same amount of time as the first, and as Naruto activated this one, something surprised Hinata. It started to spread to cover her arms and legs and put her in pain. Hinata looked with pain on her face and said confused, "It who hurts, or Naruto-kun? You didn't say it would who hurt." Naruto looked a little sad and said, "I know, Hinata-chan, I was afraid that it would scare you into not wanting it. It will be over soon." "No fair," Hinata moaned out. But like he said, it was over a few moments later. She was breathing a little hard, but the seal was done. She looked down, and it looked just like Naruto's, only with a zero in the circle. Hanabi asked a little concerned, "Are you okay? How did it feel?" "I'm okay. It felt like when you get a bad scrap, but all over," Hinata answered. After that, Hanabi was the same way. But when Naruto was about to start on, Saizasha saw a small scar about 2 inches long where the center over the seal was going to go. Naruto looked a bit confused because it looked like a stab wound, but that wasn't possible. If she was stabbed there, it would have gone through her heart. Saizasha saw where he was looking inside. "Naruto, my heart isn't on the left side, it's on the right." Naruto looked even more confused, so she elaborated, "I have dextrocardia. It's a condition where all my organs were made on the opposite side they were supposed to." "That doesn't explain the scar over where your heart is supposed to be," Naruto said. Saizasha smiled ruefully and said, "It was a parting gift from my older brother." Hinata and Hanabi's eyes widened at that, as they knew all about the Uchiha massacre and knew that Saizasha escaped that fate on a technicality. Naruto, not being in a clan, didn't know all the details about the demise of the Uchiha. "Your brother Sasuke stabbed you," Naruto said, shocked. "No, Naruto, it was our eldest brother. Itachi is the one who stabbed me through my chest, and he's also the one who massacred my clan," Saizasha said. Naruto was speechless, and she continued, "I probably used up all my luck that day when he ran me through and didn't check if I was dead. I lived because of a medical abnormality. That is why I try to have fun every day, not brood like Sasuke does." "How can you move on from something like that?" Hinata asked. "I didn't have much of a choice. It was either that or I end up like Sasuke, and I don't want that," Saizasha said. "Not that I wouldn't jump at the chance to kill Itachi. I'm just not going to go out of my way to find him." "How could someone do that to their own family?" Naruto said, finally coming out of his shock. "I don't know, Naruto-kun, but it isn't something that you have to worry about," Saizasha said as she stroked his cheek. She continued, "Now can you give me the seal, Naruto-kun? I'm getting a little cold." This brought Naruto out of his slightly angry state and got to work on the right side of her chest. After that, he explained a bit more about the seals. Naruto explained how to raise the resistance seal's level by channeling chakra to the seal, and how to make it go to 0 by making the bird seal and saying Kai. After that, they did some light sparing to get used to level 1. At the end of the day, it was just Naruto and Sazasha sitting in a comfortable silence when Naruto said, "Sazasha, if you ever do find Itachi, don't go after him by yourself." Sazasha smiled. "I won't, Naruto. That is what I have friends for." With that said, they got up and went their separate ways. Chapter 2. Naruto was in the Uchiha library working on the security seals for most of the jutsu and ninja-related information scrolls for all the people in Naruto's little study group. There were obviously no Uchiha seal masters and few journeymen because it didn't take too long for Naruto to break some of the low-level jutsu in a section on something called Hinjutsu, whatever that was. Naruto's curiosity getting the better of him, he grabbed a scroll on Hinjutsu and started to read. It was a scroll on female anatomy and pleasure and pain nerves. Naruto's first thought was to put it back on the shelf, but for some reason he couldn't, and before long there were 2 more scrolls on the table in front of him. One was on the same subject, the other was a jutsu. Sazasha walked into the library with a box of poke in her hand, looking to see if Naruto had made any progress. She came to see Naruto reading a scroll with a blush on his face and raised an eyebrow. "Naruto, how's it going with the seals?" Sazasha asked and picked up one of the scrolls he was looking at. Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin when Sazasha talked and scrambled to grab the scrolls that were on the table. Unfortunately for Naruto, Sazasha had already grabbed one and sat down to read it. Naruto was sweating bullets as Sazasha continued to read, and worst of all, Naruto couldn't see her reaction on her face because of the scroll. "Naruto," Sazasha said, enjoying some little reading. "This isn't what it looks like," Naruto said quickly. "Really, Naruto, because it looks like you are looking into the art of seduction," Sazasha said in an even voice while continuing to read. "I just wanted to know what Hinjutsu was," Naruto said. Sazasha looked up from the scroll. "I think that would be obvious with the first scroll, not the first 3 scrolls," she said. "Well, it was interesting," Naruto said. "Do you not like me anymore?" Naruto asked nervously. "No, Naruto, just because you read these I don't think, unless you Naruto. I would be concerned if you weren't interested in the female body," Sazasha said, putting down the scroll and running her hands down the sides of her body. Naruto watched her hands the entire time, and it made Sazasha smile. "Naruto," she said, getting his attention back to her face. "When you were reading these scrolls, whose body did you see? Mine? Hinata's? Hanabi's?" she asked. Naruto, who was not expecting that at all, couldn't put together the words to answer. Sazasha, still smiling, continued. "I mean, you have seen yous all topless." To tell you the truth, all 4 of us." Naruto answered. "You mean you doing this to us?" Sazasha asked. Naruto answered, "Yes and no. I have thought of that and what I would look like as a girl." "Really?" Sazasha said. "Yeah, and while I was thinking about it, I thought of something. Sazasha, why is yours, and a few others I've seen, girls' bodies developing so quickly?" Naruto asked. Sazasha nodded her head at that. It was a good question, and one she had the answer to. Girls who take their ninja training seriously and have higher levels of chakra will find that their bodies develop faster, so the body can keep up and control their chakra better. I think it's the same for boys too. So all the girls chasing your brother complaining about their development in class would just have to train harder, Naruto said. Sazasha nodded and said, "Yes, they would. Those in clans like Ino would grow a little faster than Sakura would because being a ninja's in their blood." With that said, she looked back at the scroll, made any progress on the seals. Naruto relaxed and nodded. "Yeah, I got some of the low-level jutsu unlocked, but the seals are getting more complicated and compact, so it is hard to see them all." "Don't worry, Naruto, you've got plenty of time," Sazasha said. After that, he got back to work. Over the next 2 months, Naruto learned that he was a wind user and even learned a jutsu with it. Wind style, great breakthrough. He also started to increase his chakra control and wind chakra, but that was slow going at best. He continued to study Hinjutsu in his spare time, but only Saizasha knew he studied that. Saizasha would even help him a few times, but Naruto had only given her a few messages after long spars. He was getting good at those, and you know what they say, practice makes perfect. Saizasha knew where Naruto was at now. Hinata would be putty in his hands. He was getting better every time she got a message, and she was getting to know what to look for if someone was trying to seduce her. She is the last female of her clan. The school year was over and summer just started, and Naruto and his friend were training in an empty training field. Naruto had a leaf in his hands and was trying to split it. Saizasha was doing the fire chakra exercise, which was to burn a leaf to ash in just 1 second. Hinata and Hanabi were working on the Hyuga fighting style, but it was apparent who was better at it. Hanabi was at home with the rigid and quick strike style of the Hyuga clan, but Hinata, on the other hand, was having problems getting her body to stay rigid. It disabled one of her best advantages. Hinata was much more naturally flexible, and the Hyuga style just didn't use that. Naruto was getting frustrated with the wind control exercise. He could only cut the leaf about halfway, and he had been working on this for a little over 2 months. It didn't help that Saizasha was closer to completing her exercise, but it still took about 10 seconds to burn the leaf. So he decided to finish a seal he had been working on for a little while. The new seal Naruto was working on was a chakra sensor seal that would display any chakra within a 200-meter area. He had gotten that part to work, and the people in the training area were displayed on a 2 feet by 2 feet page of scroll. It worked great, but Naruto was trying to expand the seal's range. It took about an hour, but he finally got the seal to expand its range to that of 2 kilometers. When it worked, Naruto was ecstatic and started to look at some of the new chakra signals. They were in the training ground area, so there weren't many more, but he did see 3 new signals. At least he thought there were 3 because one kept going in and out. At first he thought there was something wrong with his seal, or they were at the edge of the seal's range. But he soon figured that wasn't it, because there was one of the chakras that was even farther away than the flickering one. Naruto called everyone over and asked what they thought. The seal is working fine, but this one person keeps going in and out. Hinata answered, "Could it be that the person is hurt?" Naruto thought for a moment and said, "It could be." "Let's go check it out," Hanabi said. They all nodded and headed off. They headed to the next training ground and looked for the 3 people on the radar. They got there, and it wasn't too hard to find the 3 people, or should I say women. The first one was a woman with black hair that went to her shoulders with red eyes who was sparing. She wore what looked like white bandages with mesh armor under it with one red sleeve. The person she was sparing with was a girl whom was their age with brown hair that went to mid-back with a bard going down the left side of her face. She was wearing a simple purple kimono that had wraps around the middle with mesh armor under it. The last one wasn't wearing much at all, with a mesh under armor with an orange skirt and a tan trench coat. She had purple hair and a spiky ponytail with shaggy hair and light brown eyes. Naruto and everyone were in a tree looking at the 2 spar. Naruto looked at his map and saw that the girl's signal was the one that was coming in and out, and Naruto still couldn't figure out why. Naruto was scratching his head and said, "She doesn't look hurt." "Then what could it be?" said Saizasha. "Hinata, Hanabi, could you check what her chakra looks like?" They did, and they were confused at what they were seeing. The girl's chakra was mostly white with small patches that were the normal blue. Hinata and Hanabi told them this, and it just confused them farther. While Naruto was thinking, he noted that something was wrong. Where's the other woman at? It only took a moment for all the girls to leave the tree as Naruto was wrapped up in ninja wire and pulled out of the tree. Naruto was put to the ground and soon found the woman that was missing as her foot impacted his chest to keep him there. The girls also found her when Naruto grunted from the impact. What do we have here? The women said. Spies are getting small these days. Hey, I'm not a spy, Naruto exclaimed as he struggled to get free. And untie me. All she did was tighten the wire. The others that were sparing stopped at this point and looked at Naruto and the others that jumped out of the tree. No, I don't think I will. Now, why were you watching us? The women asked. Why should I? Naruto asked. Because I'm second in command at torture and interrogation in the village, she said. We have ways of making you talk. Naruto looked a little scared for a moment, but stuck to his guns. I'm not telling you nothing. A smile spread across her face, and she said, well then let's get started, as she pulled out an elongated kunai. No, don't hurt him, Hinata exclaimed fearfully. The other women sighed and said, stop scaring the kids, Anko. The women looked at Hinata and asked, what are you kids doing here? Hinata looked at the women and then at Naruto, who was still struggling at the ever-tightening wire, who was looking at her and sighed defeated. Hinata answered, Naruto-kun was testing a new seal he was making. It was a chakra sensor seal, and he got a strange reading, so we came here to find out what it was. The newly named Anko said, who was it coming from, thinking for a moment that it may be from the seal on her neck. It was coming from her, Hinata said, pointing at the girl who was currently behind the other women. Me, the girl said as everyone looked at her. Now that you know why we're here, untie me, Naruto yelled. Anko picked up Naruto and hugged him with his back to her and said, no, I think I'll keep you, as she licked the side of his face. Naruto didn't know how to feel about this situation he was in and looked to the others for help. The woman looked a bit tired and said, put the boy down, Anko, he's too young for you. Oh, Kurenai, always ruining my fun, Anko said as the wires came off Naruto and he scrambled over to his friends. Kurenai got everyone's attention and asked, so what was wrong with the seal? Naruto frowned at her calling his seal wrong and said, nothing's wrong with my seal, something's wrong with her. Sazasha and Hanabi face palmed at that as Hinata tried to explain what was wrong with what he just said. Anko and Kurenai looked angry at that, and the girl looked distrait at something being wrong with her. Naruto, sometimes you can really shove that foot in your mouth, can't you? Sazasha said. Naruto looked at Sazasha while pointing at them and said, they said there was something wrong with my seal. Hanabi stepped in and said, Naruto, that's not the point. I know calling one of your seals wrong is a sin in your book, but you just said that there's something wrong with her, and that's rude. Pointing's rude too. Put your hand down. Naruto just looked confused at this point, and Kurenai said, okay, what do you mean that there's something wrong with her, and why can't you get seal wrong? And for that matter, how did you know we were there? And don't tell me it was from a chakra sensor seal. Their range is about 200 meters, and I would have sensed you if you were that close, Anko said. Naruto answered, it was a chakra sensor seal, and when I got the basic one to work, I was able to extend its range to 2 kilometers. And for your information, once I got the basics down, I have never gotten a seal I've made wrong. Hanabi continued where he left off. The other reason we think it's her, and not the seal, is that her chakra is mostly white with spots of blue. Stop calling me her. My name is Yakumo of the Kurama clan, the newly named Yakumo exclaimed. And what is wrong with white chakra? Most chakra is a light blue color with a few exceptions, like Naruto's chakra is a dark blue color, but that is because he has so much of it, Hanabi said. Your chakra is white with small patches of blue that pop up every now and again. Can you use jutsu? Sazasha asked. I can only use jinjutsu and basic chakra exercises, Yakumo answered. This got Anko and Kurenai thinking. It sounded like Yakumo was missing part of her chakra, and if, as they were saying, her chakra was white and she could use jinjutsu, that she had spiritual energy but very little physical energy. That meant that she could use jinjutsu and even some taijutsu, but that would be hard without physical energy, and ninjutsu could be forever out of her reach. This left Kurenai a bit sad at the fact that her student could never learn and master some of the ninja arts. It did explain why their training had stalled, why she could use tree walking and more than likely water walking, but past that there would be nothing more she could learn outside jinjutsu. Anko, on the other hand, saw this as a way to more focus on the aspects of a ninja that she could learn. They could stop wasting half the day on Yakumo working on the basic three. Anko saw the look on Kurenai's face and said, "I don't get that look, Kurenai. This explains a lot, and now we can narrow down her training now." Kurenai sighed and said, "But this means you will only be able to master Jinjutsu." Yakumo was confused at this and asked what they were talking about. So Anko and Kurenai explained to her what they had figured out and what it meant. "So, without physical energy, I can only use Jinjutsu and some Taijutsu, because without physical energy, after a while my muscles will fall like they're on fire." "Is that right?" Yakumo said. At her sensei and her friend's nod, she continued, "So be it. I already feel the burning on my muscles, and now I can give up on ninjutsu, so I can concentrate on my family's bloodline." Anko smiled at her statement, but Kurenai didn't look so sure. Could Yakumo be a ninja without ninjutsu? There's the boy who got to be a ninja with only taijutsu, but Kurenai wasn't sure she could push Yakumo in jinjutsu and taijutsu like Guy, Lee's teacher, does for Lee only in taijutsu. "Are you sure about this?" Kurenai asked. Yakumo nodded with a determined look on her face and said, "Yes, I want to be a ninja and make my clan proud." Kurenai still didn't look too sure about this whole thing. Then Naruto got an idea and said, "What if we helped her with the physical part of her training?" Kurenai turned to them and said, "How?" "Well, we can make a seal that cuts down on the burning sensation, but I would have to have help with that, because I don't know much about the body," Naruto said and looked at Hinata. "Can you help me, Hinata?" Hinata looked surprised at being asked to help. "You are the one of us that is looking into medical seals and probably know more about the body than any of us," Naruto finished. Hinata was surprised that Naruto thought of her. "I don't know a lot. I'm positive that Yakumo's senseis would know more than I do," she said. Anko and Kurenai looked at Hinata, and Anko said, "I don't know a lot of medical ninjutsu. I just know poisons and antidotes, and Kurenai-chan is a jinjutsu mistress. More importantly, do you really think you can make a seal like that?" Anko finished talking to Naruto. Naruto smiles and answered, "Well, I made a chakra absorption and resistance seal to improve our training, so this shouldn't be more difficult than that. I just need more info on the body to know what I'm doing." "We do know Hana Inuzuka. She's a vet but would help," Anko said. Kurenai was thinking hard on this and listening in on their conversion and asked, "How long would it take you to make a seal like that?" Naruto thought for a moment and said, "I could probably have it done before we go back to the academy for our next year, so 2 months. "All right, if you can get it done by, then we'll consider it. But if you can't, I will have to look into alternatives," Kurenai said. Naruto, who was happy to be able to help someone with becoming a ninja, wanted to get right to work, but Saizasha stopped him, saying that he should meet Hana first. He nodded and set a date for them to come over to his apartment then, Anko, Hinata, and Hana the next day. Hinata wanted to refuse, but when Naruto insisted and said there may be more she could learn from Hana, she caved like a deck of cards. The next day, Hinata showed up first and saw that Naruto's apartment was a bit of a mess and suggested that they clean it before the others got there. When they finished cleaning the kitchen and the floor was when Anko and someone whom they assumed was Hana came in. Hana had pale skin and long brown hair that she had in a ponytail. She had the red fangs of the Inuzuka clan, like Kiba, and wore the standard Chunin vest that was open a little at the top and black shorts. She also had a tattoo on her upper right arm that resembles a flower. When they got there, they stared to discuss the problem and possible solutions. It took about a week and a lot of work, but they came up with an idea. They would make 2 seals. One would be a red blood cell production seal that would be on Yakumo's hips that would double, maybe triple the amount of red blood cells in her body. The other would be on her throat and collarbone that would take in more oxygen to give to the red blood cells. With these 2 seals, it would give what little physical energy she had and maximize its effectiveness. Now, that was the easy part. The next part was making the seals, and that would take a few weeks. In this time, it was mostly Naruto asking questions about the body and Hinata learning what she could from Hana. During all this, Hana and Anko were also learning a bit more about seals. It was about a week in when Anko noted some scrolls on Naruto's desk in his room and looked at them. When she found out about the contents, she had a laugh. Little Naruto was learning Hinjutsu, and the scrolls on his desk weren't the basics, they were more toward the intermediate level and a fuujutsu. When she brought it up in front of everyone, Naruto couldn't look at anyone, and when Hinata found out what it was, she invented a new red. When Hinata found out that Sasasha was helping him in the art well, her mouth worked faster than her brain when she said she would help him practice too. That day was the best and most embarrassing in her life because, like Sasasha, thought Hinata was putty in his hands, and while getting the massages, she let out a loud moan. Hana and Anko were doing their best not to laugh, but it was a losing battle. The seal was done about 2 weeks before the next school year, so they got to work. Naruto told Anko to have Yakumo come in a bikini because Naruto would have to work on her collarbone and hips. This let Anko have her fun, teasing him about wanting to see Yakumo naked. She left a blushing Naruto to give Yakumo the massage. The next day, Naruto, Kurenai, and Yakumo met in the training ground they first met in, and Naruto said to Yakumo, "Are you ready to get started?" Yakumo nodded her head a bit embarrassed and took off her purple kimono, revealing a black bikini as she laid down on the ground. Kurenai was not happy about a boy seeing her student in that, especially after learning that Naruto is also learning seduction, but Anko assured her that it was necessary. After she lay down, Naruto got the ink ready and knelt next to her. "This will be cold and tickle a bit, but try not to move," Naruto said. Yakumo nodded and tried to relax as Naruto got started on her neck and collarbone. The first one took about 20 minutes, and when it was activated, it looked like a choker with the word oxygen in a circle in the middle around her neck. The ones on her hips took a bit longer at 30 minutes, and when activated looked like 2 elongated swirls with a thick black line with 4 prongs coming out on both her hips. With that done, Naruto checked to see if the seals were working okay, and when he saw they were, he smiled at his work. Naruto took her hand to help her up and said, "The seal are working, and it should take about 2 weeks for the red blood cell seal to reach at max production. The air seal should be working now and should also filter out poisons that are inhaled." Yakumo looked at the seals on her hips and felt the one on her neck and pulled Naruto into a hug. "Thank you for helping me to achieve my dream, Naruto-kun," she said in the hug. Naruto hugged back and said, "I'm glad I could help." With this, Naruto made a new friend and a new training partner. Chapter 3. When Naruto was cleaning his desk one day, he saw that he had a lot of seals around his apartment from all the practice he does. He relished now that when he learned the seal divide jutsu, that turns one large seal into multiple seals, he had to have dozens of explosive, trap, and security seals all over his desk. When he brought it up during a training session, Sasasha said maybe he should sell them to a weapon shop as they also seal the basic seals and could probably sell as extra seals. The next morning, Naruto put on the black silk slack shirt and pants that Hinata had gotten his for his birthday with an orange tie. He went shop to shop trying to sell his seals, but he was having no luck in selling them and some of the time getting in the door. He now was going to a shop called the Steel Claw. When he walked in, he saw a young woman wearing a leaf headband with brown hair that was tied in buns on her head. She had on a pink Chinese-style shirt with dark green pants that the clothes were a bit tight and showed off her small B-cup breast, shapely hips, and long legs. She looked up from the magazine she was reading and said with a smile, "Hi, I'm Tintin. How may I help you?" "Hi, my name is Naruto, and I was wondering if I could talk to the owner," Naruto asked. "Sure, let me go get him," Tintin said as she moved to the back of the store, where Naruto saw where the forge was. Tintin came back with a bear of a man that had short brown hair and a brown shirt and a black apron. The man said, "How may I help you?" Hi, my name is Naruto, and I've been studying seal for a while, and I was wondering if you would be interested in the seals I've made, Naruto said, putting on his best salesman smile. Tintin about rolled her eyes at Naruto because there was no way a boy this young could know much on seals. He only looked about 13 or 14. She had been studying her last year at the academy when she looked into the art. I mean, if you have as big an interest in weapons as she does, there's only so much room in your closet to put them. The man, on the other hand, knew not to judge a book by its cover. He did get some people to come in and try to seal him something about once a week. Sometimes people could surprise you. On the other hand, that was only 1 out of 10 that came into his shop. "So let's see what you have, boy," the man said. Naruto didn't like being called boy, but let it go because he was trying to make money, and Hanabi said that he should work on his attitude a little, not to be rude to people. Naruto got out a scroll and get it on the counter. With a poof of smoke, there was 3 stacks of seals and a stack of metal ring and clamps. Naruto pointed to the first 2 stacks of seals and said, "These are explosive and flash seals," then pointing at the last stack, "And these are a sealing trap I call chakra threading." The man looked at the stacks and was a little surprised. The boy had at least 100 of each of the seals. As the man looked at the seals, that both the flash and the explosive seal had a timed and proximity triggers. He then passed the seal to his employee and looked at the trap seal. He had a decent grasp on fuujutsu and was impressed that a boy was advanced enough to make these. Tinin was thinking maybe she was a little too quick to judge Naruto if he could already make something like this. She could make something like that too. She was a bit more advanced than the seal, and when she looked at the trap seal, she also understood those, but thoughts were probably her limit. The man looked at Naruto and said, "These aren't bad, and there are quite a few of them, but what are the clamps and rings?" Naruto picked up one of each and said, "These are book and scroll security clamps. They can be set to blood, chakra, and password, and have some durability seals on the metal, so someone can't just break or cut them off. The seal would work better if they were carved or forged into the metal, but I don't know how to do that. I know that they can take being thrown in a fire with a scroll, and both the clamp and the book or seal would be fine." Now the man and Tintin were impressed. The man knew that those would seal pretty well, and the other seal were good too. He knows Tintin could make these seal. Her knowledge in seal is part of the reason he hired her, and all the other seals would be quick sellers. "Tell me, boy, how many of these could you make in a day?" the man asked. "I could make hundreds if I put my mind to it," Naruto said. Tintin was shocked at this and asked how. "I asked the seal divide jutsu. It makes one big seal and splits them into smaller seals," Naruto answered. The man went behind his desk and pulled out some ink and a big sheet of paper and said, "Show me." Naruto shrugged his shoulders and got to work. Tintin and her boss were surprised at how fluid Naruto could write seal, and how his brush never seemed to run out of ink mid-stroke. When he was done, they saw that it was a new type of seal. For what they could tell, it was a combination between storage and an explosive seal. After he was done, he went there a few hand seals and touched the paper. The end result was 20 seal, about half the size of a normal seal. Then Naruto took out a few cases full of sunbond needles and put about 20 in each seal. With that done, he took out a kunai and cut up the seals. Tintin and her boss looked at the new seal and saw that it was a trap seal that purpled weapons in a given direction. "Well, Naruto-san, I'm impressed that someone your age besides Tintin can make seal this good. So I'll make you a deal. I will buy some seals from you, and I will even teach you to forge if you want," the man said. "How many?" Naruto asked. The man thought for a moment and said, "How about 500 a month of each of the seals we saw today? And if you chose to learn to forge, I will want about 200 of each the book and scroll security sealing clamps." Naruto was shocked at the number. That would be 2,000 paper seals a month. He knew he could do it if he worked on a day or 2 full days a month, but that was a lot of seals. "How much?" Naruto asked. If he was going to make that mini seal, he wanted to get paid. Man took out a piece of paper and wrote down some quick numbers. He figured he could make 1,000 yen on each trap seal and 3,500 on the clamps. So his total profit would be about 3.5 million yen. I will give you 400,000 yen for the paper seals and 600,000 for the book and scroll security clamps. I will also teach you to forge the rings and clamps, the man said. Naruto's jaw about hit the floor at the number. With that kind of money coming in every month and learning to forge, he could buy just about anything he wanted. Naruto put out his hand and said, "You have yourself a deal." The man smiled and shook Naruto's hand, as he knew this was the beginning of a very profitable friendship. While over the summer, as Naruto was helping Yakumo on her seal, he started to learn some wind jutsu, because by the middle of summer, he had been able to split his leaf. He learned wind style gale palm, wind Simbon, and he was working on making a wind clone. He still couldn't do a basic clone. Hinata and Hanabi decided to learn what their elements were. Hinata had water and Hanabi had earth. They started to learn their elemental control exercise for their elements. Hinata had to lift a 6-inch ball of water out of a pond, and Hanabi had to turn a leaf to dust. They were all practicing with their element in one of the Uchiha training grounds with a small lake in it. They were all working with their elements. Sasasha was finishing her control exercise, and she nearly had it and was going to work on some jutsu next. Hinata was making the water ripple, but no water was coming up. Hanabi had made about the same amount of progress with her leaf, only drying it a little. Hanabi looked up from her leaf and said, "There's a storm coming. I think we should get out of here." Sasasha nodded and said, "We should head home." Looking at the storm clouds rolling their way, it looks like a pretty bad storm. Naruto was going throw hand seals for what must have been the 50th time, and the wind picked up next to him. It started to turn into a Naruto shape. It had the arms and legs and most of the chest before it exploded into a gust of wind. Naruto caught his breath and said, "I want to get this jutsu down before going home." "All right, don't stay out too long, or you might catch a cold," Sasasha said. Hanabi turned to her sister and said, "Are you coming, One-chan?" Hinata shook her head and said, "I want to practice a little more before going home. I'll be home in a little while." "Okay, One-chan, don't stay out too long," Hanabi said as she headed home. Sasasha saw this as an opportunity to tease Hinata a bit. She walked up behind Hinata and whispered in her ear, "Work hard on this, and maybe you can ask Naruto to work hard on you." Sasasha finished with a smile. Hinata turned red and went back to work with a little more determination now. Sasasha then said bye and went home to her brooding brother. It wasn't 15 minutes later when Naruto was getting frustrated with the clone. He could get the body to form, but the head wouldn't, and a headless would stay a moment before it exploded. In Naruto's frustration, he put in way too much chakra, and a mini tornado touched down next to him. When the tornado vanished, in its place was a girl in her late teens with white hair that went down to her shoulders and electric blue eyes. She was wearing a blue-gray kimono with what looked like storm clouds on it. She looked at herself a little and what was around her and smiled. The commotion got Hinata's attention and saw the girl and looked from her to Naruto, wondering if he had an explanation. Naruto looked confused at the girl and asked, "How are you? Because you defiantly aren't my clone." "So this is the mortal plane," the girl said as she continued to look around and at herself, totally ignoring Naruto's question. Naruto took out a kunai, and Hinata got into the Hyuga stance and asked again, "Who are you?" The girl looked at them with a big smile and said, "Hello, I'm Erishur. Who are you?" Naruto answered, "I'm Naruto. What are you, and why did you appear where my clone was going to?" "I'm a storm spirit, and it's always so boring as a spirit. All I can do is make storms like that one and throw lightning at people," Erishur said as she pointed at the storm clouds rolling toward them. "How I got here was that you used so much energy that I was able to use it to get here. It's so much more interesting here than it is in the spirit realm." "So you were just bored and desisted to come?" Naruto asked, confused. Erishur nodded and said, "It's so much fun watching you mortals try to gain control over our elements." "So you just want to have some fun here?" Hinata asked. Erishur answered, Yes, it's so rare for a spirit to come here. It's fun to watch mortals use our elements in such interesting ways. Erishur, what are the elements that you can use? Naruto asked. I can control the wind, water, and lightning. I use them to create all kinds of different storms. Erishur answered with a bit of pride. Can you help Hinata out with her control on the water? Naruto asked. Sure, Erishur said existed to help. They told her the exercise, and she did it without moving her hand or anything. Erishur had Hinata do the exercise, and she saw the problem. You're trying to force the water where it doesn't want to go. You have to let the water flow into the ball and then lift it, Erishur said. Hinata took the advice and let the water flow. She swirled the water into a bulge on the water surface, had when she got about half a ball it popped. At this point, Naruto hugged Hinata and said, That was great, Hinata. You'll have this down in no time. Hinata blushed at how close Naruto was to her and hugged back. Erishur, would you like to stay with us? I'm sure we could have lots of fun together, Naruto asked. Erishur smiled and answered, I would love to, Naruto, and held out her hand to Naruto. Naruto took it, and there was a pain in his right shoulder. He pulled up his shirt sleeve, and there was the word storm that looked like it was branded into his shoulder. There we have a contract, and I'm now bowed to you, Erishur said. Contract? Naruto asked. Yep, now I can come to this plane anytime I want, and you can call me to play or help you out, Erishur said. Cool, Naruto said as he looked at his shoulder. Erishur, is there a way for you to hide, so it won't be too suspicious coming into town with you? Sure, Erishur said as she turns into an eagle. It was about 2.5 feet tall and had a white head with bark blue feathers with white tips. Beautiful, Hinata said. Thank you, Erishur said. Let's get out of there before it starts to storm, Naruto said as Erishur perched herself on his shoulder. They were walking through the Uchiha district when it started to rain, and they took shelter in one of the abandoned houses. When they got inside, and it started pouring outside, they asked if Erishur if she could stop the rain, but she said no because it's easy to start a storm, but stopping one is extremely difficult. Hinata was blushing at the thought of being alone with her. While mostly alone, Erishur was there, but she was admiring her handiwork outside. Hinata desisted to go with Sasasha's suggestion and asked, Naruto-kun, could you give me a massage while we wait? Sure, Hinata, but you do know you'll have to lose most of those clothes, Naruto said. Hinata, still blushing, nodded and said, I have a new bathing suit with me, so I will just change into that. Naruto nodded and Hinata went into another room. He unsealed a futon that he had. Sasasha had been a bit demanding of his massages lately, and he just carried one with him now. Next, he took out a scroll with a jutsu on it he was going to try this time. It was called Heated Touch, and it worked the deeper muscles and gave the recipient a sense of warmth and increased the recipients their sensitivity to pleasure. Hinata came back into the room and was wearing a lavender-colored one-piece that was cut to look like a two-piece. The suit left her stomach and back exposed, and the top and bottom were connected by a pair of silver rings. There was also another silver ring between both the cups of the top. Naruto thought the suit looked good on her and said so to her, only making her blush harder. She said a quick thank you and lay down on the futon. Naruto desisted to take off his shirt, and Hinata had a hard time looking away from him. All the spars with him and his recent interest in forging had been great to his body. Naruto started with a normal massage and worked her shoulders, back, and legs. Hinata was trying not to be vocal about what she was feeling, but it was hard. She was still giving small groans and moans in pleasure as Naruto worked her back. This was music to Naruto's ears, and he worked to find the notes in Hinata's muscles and find the places that were the most pleasurable to her. He found that she reacted to most of what he did, be it, but she was the most vocal when Naruto worked her back. That might be because of the near D cup she had on her chest, which Naruto wasn't complaining about. When he was done with the basic massage, he went into more detail with the heated touch. Hinata really tried to keep her voice to a minimum, be it was hard, but when Naruto's hands started to heat up and reach deeper into, she resisted for about 7 seconds. After that, there was no more groans, they were all soft to mild moans, and she just couldn't stop them. Her body seemed to heat up and the heat seemed to travel to her breasts and between her legs. Naruto, during all this, was enjoying all the sound she was making and was trying to make her make new ones. After he started to use the heat touch, Hinata started to smell really good. He had found out one day working with Hana that he could smell better than most people, not as good as an Inuzuka, but still pretty good. The smell kept getting stronger, and when Naruto was working her legs and thighs, when he found the sources of the smell. When he was working the inside of her thigh, Naruto touched a clear liquid, and from all the books he had read, he knew what it was and desisted to have a little fun. Thirk slime x thirk 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 xxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxx Hinata. Hinata hummed as an answer to distracted to notes the change in his voice. Naruto smiled and continued. How about I make you feel even better? Hinata's legs were a little apart, and Naruto used his hand and started to rub in between her legs. Hinata, not expecting this at all, let out a loud moan. Hinata froze and asked in a shaky voice, "What are you doing, Naruto-kun?" Naruto got down to her ear and whispered in her ear, "I'm making you feel even better, aren't I?" as Naruto continued to rub between her legs. Hinata's only response was another loud moan, and a shiver went down her spine. Naruto gently turned her over and got a good look at her. She was breathing a bit hard, and her nipples were hard. She had sweat forming on her body and a dark spot between her legs. Hinata was blushing hard when she saw Naruto looking at her with a bit of hunger in his eyes. She knew she couldn't say no to him. She nodded her head a little, but Naruto wanted something else. "Beautiful. May I continue?" Naruto said. It only took a moment for Hinata to get what he wanted. He wanted her to say it. In a breathless voice, she said, "Yes." Naruto didn't need any more incentive and moved to knead Hinata's breast, and his other hand goes to the top of her suit. Hinata was moaning and had a grip on the futon. Naruto's hand pulled down one side of the swimsuit, and he started to suck on the breast he wasn't kneading. Naruto worked down the other side of her suit as Hinata got her arms out of the top of the suit. Naruto got right back to work, and Hinata let out a small scream as she was arching her back in his hand and mouth. Naruto continued to work the bathing suit down Hinata's hips, and he got his first look at Hinata naked, and he loved what he saw. Hinata tried to cover herself, but Naruto stopped her and said, "You look absolutely stunning, Hinata. What do you want me to do?" Hinata knew he wouldn't continue until he got an answer and said, "More Naruto-kun, more." Naruto smiled and said, "I'm going to taste you, Hinata-chan," and he got right to work. Hinata shivered at Naruto's bluntness, and when he first licked her, she couldn't stop a mid-scream from coming from her throat. When he started to suck on her silk, she screamed loudly, and she might have pulled out some of Naruto's hair. She was riding wave after wave of pleasure at what Naruto was doing. As Naruto continued his assault on her pussy, she felt a coiling in her stomach, and she knew what was coming. She saw Naruto put his hand on her lower stomach and pushed a burst of heated touch directly into her womb. That was all it took for Hinata to have the biggest orgasm of her life as her came, with the loudest scream yet on Naruto's tongue. Naruto loved the way she tasted as he licked it off her, prolonging her orgasm. When he was done, he got up and got a good look at her. He wished he had a camera right now. Sweat covered her body, legs spread, chest heaving to get the air back in her lungs, and she was shivering a little. She was biting her finger, which did nothing to stop her scream, and her eyes were glazed over. She looked absolutely beautiful in Naruto's eyes. Slime and Naruto took her finger out of her mouth, and Hinata's eyes came back into forces as she looked at Naruto. There was no blush on her face for once, still riding her sexual high, as she wrapped her arms around his neck. "I love you," Hinata said in a clear and loving voice and pulled Naruto down for a kiss. Naruto was stunned at her words, but slowly melted into the kiss, which was quickly becoming more heated. Hinata got to know what she tasted like, and Naruto got to taste Hinata's tonsils. They finally blocked the kiss so they could breath, and Naruto looked into Hinata's eyes and saw nothing but love and lust. "Did you mean that, Hinata-chan?" Naruto asked. "Yes, Naruto-kun. I've had a crush on you for a long time, and when we started to train together, it slowly turned to love. I never told you because I didn't want to be rejected," Hinata answered. She smiled and ran her fingers through Naruto's hair, and to think, all you had to do to get me to say was to make it so I couldn't think straight. "Hinata-chan, I can't tell you I love you too," Naruto said, which made Hinata look sad. He continued, "I can't because I don't know what love is, Hinata. Maybe you can show me, Hinata-chan." Naruto finished putting a hand on Hinata's cheek. Hinata smiled at that last part and said, "I'll try my best," and brought Naruto in for another kiss. "I think we should stop now if you don't want to go farther, because I'm hard as a rock right now," Naruto said. Hinata couldn't help it and looked down at his pants and saw that he indeed was. She blushed and nodded her head. They got up and Hinata got into the other room to change. When she got into the other room, she couldn't help herself and turned on her Byakugan. Naruto was at full mast at 6.5 inches at the age of 13. Hinata knew he had a few more years to grow and that he was going to make her scream in the near future. Naruto walked up to Erashur and held out his arm, and she jumped on. He started to stroke her head and said, "Did you enjoy the show, Erashur?" "Oh yes, it was interesting to see a mortal mating ritual up close," Erashur said. Naruto looked embarrassed and said, "Well, we didn't mate, that was just foreplay." "You were just playing? Can you play with me like that?" Erashur asked. Naruto, still blushing at the question, and said, "Well, if you want, I would have to ask Hinata first, because I'm pretty sure we're boyfriend and girlfriend now." Hinata came out of the boyfriend comment and blushed, but asked, "What did you have to ask me, Naruto-kun?" Naruto turned to her and said, "Erashur saw what we did and asked if I could play with her like that." Hinata turned red at the question and that she forgot that Erashur was there. She answered, "I don't mind if you play with her or the others, just don't go any further than we have." Naruto smiled and said, "Okay, Hinata-chan," as he held out his hand, which Hinata took and pulled her to him and spun her around and put her back to his chest. He put her in a one-arm hug and whispered in her ear, "And maybe you can help me practice more." Hinata shivered at the comment and reached up to run a hand through his hair and said, "I'd love to." Naruto looked outside at the weather. It had stopped raining momentarily, so they desisted to run home now before it started again. When they got to Hinata's compound first, and said a quick goodbye and a kiss on the cheek. But they were seen by someone, and that someone went back into the compound after they saw. Hinata was on cloud 9 on her way to her room. She had told Naruto her feelings, and he accepted them. When she got to her room, she desisted. She needed a bath to get rid of the smell of sex off her. When she was getting her stuff, she didn't notice his door open and closes quietly. The person got behind her and said, "Did you enjoy your time with Naruto-kun Wani-chan?" Hinata jumped and turned around to face Hanabi, and from what I smell you enjoyed a lot. Hinata blushed at already being found out and tried to play it off. "Yes, I did enjoy it, but what smell are you taking about? Don't give me that I've walked in on you in the thongs of passion on yourself. I know what it smells like, and that good night kiss Naruto gave you at the door makes it pretty easy to know something happened," Hanabi said. Hinata knew she had been caught and said they would talk in the bath. When they both had their bathrobes, they went to the hot springs that were in the compound. They set up a privacy seal and took off their robes and got into the water. Hanabi asked what happened, and Hinata told her all of it from the storm spirit to the good night kiss at the door. Hanabi was happy that her sister got her feelings out to Naruto and that her sister didn't stop Naruto from giving them those killer massages. Maybe she will go for what Hinata got next time. Hinata asked if anything interesting happened at home. Hanabi said it was the same with the elders pushing her to best Hinata in their monthly spars, and it was really getting on her nerves. Maybe she could do something to get back at them. Chapter 4. It was reaching the end of the summer, and Naruto thought about what he had accomplished in this short summer break. He had helped a clan heiress on her way to becoming a ninja. Hanabi said having a clan heiress owe you a favor was a great thing. Naruto was just happy to have a new friend. He had learned some forging, enough to make his ring and clamps. Naruto went with the metal pressing option to make them. That was when you took a hammer with the seal carved into it and you hammer out the seal onto the rings and clamps. Tintin had been a great help with the making of the rings and clamps. He had to pay her, of course, but it was a small price to pay for Naruto. He was still making enough money to get whatever a 13-year-old boy could ever want, and then some. Tintin turned out to be a great friend for Naruto to make. She was an orphan also and had nothing against him, and also started to learn seals from Naruto. She had just graduated from the academy and had been top kunoichi. She was on a team with some people whom she called eccentric. He was not one to judge, but one day, when he came to pick her up from her team to help him with forging, it was an interesting day. Tintin's teacher was a guy named Guy, and he was an interesting person. He had a bowl-cut hair with the biggest bushy eyebrows that Naruto had ever seen. He could swear they were moving on their own. He wore a green one-piece training jumpsuit with orange leg warmers. The man also had a tendency to go into long speeches about nothing but the flames of youth, and Tintin said, if he ever starts spouting anything about the flames of youth, like her teammate does now, she wouldn't help him anymore. Tintin seemed to be able to use any kind of weapon from a sword to a battle axe, and seemed to know the basics of all the weapons she used. She knew more than the basics with a sword and long-range weapons, and in the use of wires, but she seemed to know next to nothing about most elemental jutsu other than she had a lightning affinity. Naruto had given her a book from the Uchiha library about elemental manipulation and just lighting chakra by itself. Hanabi had recently taken an interest in electronics and how they worked, and with the money that Naruto now had, he had bought her some books on the subject. He had also got her some electronics that he could get his hands on, like wireless radios, normal radios, TVs, and he even convinced Anko to give him one of the broken computers in her department and a radio dish. The computer and radio dish would have been near impossible to get new because of how rare they were and how hard they were to make. When Naruto gave Hanabi these, she gave one of her rare shows of emotion and just had to thank him for the early birthday present. It was a great day to be Naruto, and it went down as one of his best days next to the day he discovered seals and the days that he spent most of his day practicing hinjutsu with Hinata, turning her into a pile of mush. Saizasha even took up the violin because she saw that everyone else had a hobby and she decided to get one. Naruto had forging and fuujutsu. Hanabi had her electronics. Hinata liked to study flowers and other plants. Yakumo liked to paint. Tintin liked to study books on old weapons. It was easy for her to get lessons as she was the last Uchiha sister. It was almost too easy, and that just pissed Saizasha off. Her brother could get most anything he wanted if he showed the smallest interest in it. She wasn't going to pass up a free opportunity, and she took the few free lessons with a few beginner's books the owner of the shop gave her. Naruto was taking it easy today and was finishing up one of the few ninjutsu books that he had gotten from his Gigi. At the end of the book, he saw some sealing notes that he saw in a lot of the books, but this one looked different as it had a little over half a blood seal on it. The seal just seemed to run off the page. He looked at the other books, he had seen notes on the back covers, and looked at them more closely. It took Naruto about an hour, but when he was done, he was left with 20 books. Out of all the books Naruto was given, most of them had notes on the back, but those he picked out stood out as a real seal, and not just notes. When he set them up, there were a security word and a blood seal. The seal was overly complicated to hide what it really was. He first tried the word seal, putting in the name of the village, the names of the Hokages, and some of the clans. After that, he took a closer look at the seal, and a word seemed to come to him, Uzumaki. He wondered why it would be his last name that worked the lock, but he just used it and the first part of the seal unlocked. All that was left was the blood seal, and if his name unlocked the first seal, he used his blood on the second. With a puff of smoke, there was a 3.5 feet long, 1 foot wide scroll. It was dark blue with a crashing wave design on both ends of the scroll. There was a note on the front of the scroll on a red swirl emblem, keeping the scroll shut. He took the note that turned out to be a letter and read it. Dear Naruto-chan, hello, honey, this is your mother. If you are reading this, I'm no longer among the living. I'm sorry, my little Naruto-chan. My name is Kushina Uzumaki, and I'm originally from the land of whirlpools Yuzushiobikure, and I am a part of the Uzumaki clan. I was sent to the Leaf Village to promote continued friendship between the two villages. But soon after I left, our village was attacked, and the village was all but destroyed. Most of our clan's heirlooms and teachings were almost lost, but the clan head at the time was able to save them in the scroll in front of you. He used fuujutsu to make the scroll go to the person who was the safest and the closest to the head of the family. That was me, and at the age of 10, I didn't know what to do with it. But when I made Genin, I looked through the scroll and learned much from it. I'm even in the bingo book as an S-ranked ninja as Whirlpool's Red Death. I wish I could have watched you grow up to the man you were always meant to be. I love you, Naruto-chan, and I always will. Naruto was crying by the end of the letter, but there were two things on his mind. He needed to protect this scroll, and he was going to have a talk with the old man. Naruto took the Uzumaki scroll and sealed in the seal on his wrist and ran to the Hokage's tower. Naruto walked up to the secretary in front of the Hokage's office and asked if he could see the Hokage. This concerned her a bit, because Naruto always called the Hokage Gigi when he came by and said that the Hokage was free and let him in. Naruto went to the chair in front of his desk and said, "Hokage, we need to talk." This also surprised Sarutobi a great deal, as when he looked at Naruto, he didn't have his normal smile on his face. Sarutobi said, "Hello, Naruto. How is the fuujutsu study going?" "Good, I'm into the second set of books, and I'm almost done with them. But that isn't why I'm here. In those books, there was a word in blood seal, and I want to know if you know the name Kushina Uzumaki." Naruto asked. The Hokage sighed at the question. He expected to have this conversation with him, but not now, and asked, "Where did you hear the name from?" Naruto pulled out the letter and said, "From this letter, she wrote to me." Now, there was no way out of this. The Hokage said, "She was your mother, Naruto. I was going to tell you about her when you made Chunin, and I will tell you about your father when you make Jonin." "Why?" Naruto said in a controlled voice. "You have to understand, Naruto. They had many enemies that wouldn't give it a second thought about sending ninja to kill their child," Sarutobi answered. Naruto was angry and exclaimed, "I don't care, old man. All I ever wanted to know is if they loved me. You could have at least told me that. All that you ever told me was that you didn't know who they were." Sarutobi sighed again, expecting this, and said, "I couldn't risk you asking me more questions about them. They had enemies in this village, too. It would only take one misstep on my part to give them all the information they needed to figure out who your parents were. And that is something I couldn't let happen." Naruto was silent for a moment and went through the breathing exercises that the girls taught him so he wouldn't lose it, and asked, "Did they leave me anything?" "There were a few things, but you have to be a ninja for some of them. I can give you some books, scrolls, and your mother's sword. You already have your mother's fuujutsu books," Sarutobi said. He got up and went to the same safe. He went to get the first set of scrolls he got. When he came back, he had about 10 scrolls and handed them to Naruto. Naruto looked at the scrolls as the Hokage put them in front of him. There was some on forging and some metal to work with. There were a lot of spare weapons. Then he got to his mother's sword and took it out of its scroll. It was beautiful. It had a dark blue sheath with silver accents and a red hilt. Another scroll came out with the sword, and it was a Kenjutsu style. He pulled out the sword a bit and saw that it too was a dark blue color, and it was polished to a beautiful shine. "It's beautiful," Naruto said in a soft voice. "That it is. Was there anything else you wanted, Naruto?" Sarutobi asked. "Yes. Do you have a bingo book with her in it?" Naruto asked. Sarutobi thought for a moment and went to one of the bookshelves in his office, looked through it quickly, and picked one out and handed it to Naruto. "It is separated by village in an alphabetical order," Sarutobi said. Naruto nodded and left the Hokage's office. When Naruto got home, he called Erishur and told her to tell the girls that he wouldn't be coming to train today because he had a lot to think about. So Naruto started going through the scrolls he got from the Hokage and the Uzumaki scroll to see what was inside them. He went through the forging scrolls and found that had some techniques to make seals into metal, and one of them was the ways he was making his, but there were others. In one of the others, there was a small library, and Naruto didn't have enough shelves to put them all, so put getting more on his to-do list. There were a few scrolls with all the spare weapons Naruto would need for a few years, and he put that one over to the side to look at them all later. Then he got to the Uzumaki scroll and started going through that. There was everything from history to ninjutsu. Naruto couldn't get the grin off his face when he got to the Fuujutsu section. It was huge. He thought he should start with history to get to know more about his clan and where they were from. He found out that this clan was from a village called Yuzushiogakure, which was in the land of the whirling tides. They were a relatively peaceful people that lived on a series of islands that were protected by natural whirlpools and away from the mainland during the Warring Clans era. He also found out that the Uzumaki clan helped in the creation of the Hidden Leaf Village. They acted as the neutral ground that the Senju clan and the Uchiha clan used to meet and negotiate the creation of the new village. Over many meetings, they came to an agreement, and when the Senju and the Uchiha came to this agreement, many other clans, not wanting to fight the two clans at once, quickly joined. With many other clans joining them, the Leaf Village quickly grew, and the other clans, fearing what this new village could do, quickly made their own villages to try to match the Leaf Village's strength. As a show of friendship and alliance, the Leaf added the Uzumaki swirl to the back of their flak jackets. He also found out that he had a bloodline. It was a body-based bloodline that gave him much larger reserves of chakra, increased stamina, and an accelerated healing rate. An Uzumaki could even lose a hand, leg, or arm, and if he were to survive the event, the part of the body could grow back in a few days. He also learned that an Uzumaki could use their blood to heal others if he were to put enough chakra into it. The next thing he found out was that an Uzumaki's mind was wired to read Fuujutsu, as if it was a book, which seemed to be a bit of a double-edged sword. They were known throughout the world as the best in the world, as it was said that one Uzumaki seal master was worth 5 of any other. When Naruto read this, he knew he had a long way to go. But being known throughout the world as the best sealers got them some enemies. And one day during the Second Shinobi War, Yuzushiogakure was nearly wiped off the map. He got to a section of the scroll that had crafting and forging materials. If Naruto was reading the scroll right, there was at least 4 whole dragon hides with the bones. There was also a sea serpent that was 60 feet long with the bones. It even had a large quantity of chakra metal, and all of this could be melted down into weapons. If Naruto desired to sell any of this, which he wasn't, he would make tens of millions of yen, and he would be set for the rest of his life. Naruto must have been at it for hours, as when he looked out the window, the sun was already setting. He was thinking about what he had learned for about 10 minutes before someone knocked at the door. He got up to answer it and opened the door to Hinata, Hanabi, Saizasha, and Tintin standing at his front door. "Hello, Naruto-kun, you didn't come to training today, which is really odd for you. So we decided to come over and see what was wrong," Saizasha said. Naruto looked at all the girls and saw that they weren't going to be going anywhere until they got an explanation and invited them in. They saw a lot of books on his dining room table, most of them open on all sorts of different subjects. The girls had a seat at the table, and Naruto laid up against one of the walls in the kitchen. Naruto sighed and said, "Nothing's wrong. I just got some information that is taking a little while to accept." Hinata asked, curious, "What did you find out about?" Naruto sighed again and knew he had to get this off his chest, and he knew that his apartment was secure from the outside. He wouldn't practice Henjutsu in his apartment if it wasn't, because that would lead to a lot of questions he really didn't want to have to answer. He wanted to talk to the Hyuga head about why his daughters were nude on his bed. He said, I found out who my mother was. The news surprised everyone in his apartment, especially Tintin, because as an orphan, it was a dream come true to know who your parents are. Tintin asked, who was she? Her name was Kushina Uzumaki. She was a jonin from this village, Naruto said. It only took a moment, and Tintin was nearly on top of him with stars in her eyes, and said, your mom was Whirlpool's Red Death? She surprised the hell out of Naruto, because she must have Shunshinned in front of him. Naruto said, yes, I think that was her name in the bingo book I got from the old man. Wow, Tintin. Talk about a fangirl moment, Sazasha said with a smirk. Tintin turned and pointed a finger at Sazasha and said, this is not a fangirl moment. Kushina Uzumaki is one of only 4 kunoichi that have ever been given an S rank in the bingo book. All the other girls were surprised at that, and Tintin continued, she is one of my heroes, and she is one of the few people that can match one of the Sannin in a fight. Her skill with a sword was said to be better than that of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, and paired with her skill with water jutsu, being just below that of the 2nd Hokage, she was nearly untouchable on the battlefield. Is that true, Naruto-kun? Hinata said. Naruto sighed as he rubbed the back of his head and said, yes, from what I learned today, that's all true. If you want to look at her entry in the bingo book, it's on the table, pointing to one of the books in front of Hanabi. Hanabi saw the bingo book and picked it up from where it lay open face down on the table and looked at the entry for Kushina Uzumaki. It had all the information that Tintin had said, and a bit more like Kushina Uzumaki was from Uzushi Obikure, which was in the land of the whirling tides. It also said that she was one of the last members of the Uzumaki clan. Hanabi asked about the clan, and Naruto said that yes, he was also a part of that clan, and he had been doing some reading from the books that the old man had given him on his clan's history. He wasn't going to tell them about the clan scroll that he got, but told them about the scrolls that he got from the old man, including his mother's sword and the kinjutsu that came with it. When he mentioned the sword and the kinjutsu-style Tintin was almost vibrating with excitement and asked to see it. Naruto thought there was no way Tintin could be this turned on by the sight of the blue blade, and Tintin was almost drooling at the sight of it. She asked to hold it, but Naruto said no, and Tintin understood that the sword was going to be very important to him. She was able to look at the kinjutsu style, though. She asked if she could learn the style, and Naruto thought for a moment. He knew that the scroll that the old man had given him was mostly the basics, and the rest of the style was in the Uzumaki clan scroll. So he said yes, but he wasn't going to be paying her for her help at the forge anymore. She took that as a small price to pay and agreed. They talked more of the history of his clan, but Sazasha and Hanabi were only listening with half an ear as they thought about what they had learned. Naruto was the last male heir known to a clan that used to rule a country, and he may have to act as a clan head in the future. They had already been working with Naruto to help keep his cool, but they may have to do a lot more than that if he was going to be head of a clan. After the girls got all these questions out, it had already been a few hours and was starting to get dark outside. They could see that Naruto was more relaxed now that he had gotten all that out. He was still a bit on edge, and Sazasha decided to help Naruto relax. Looking at the Hyuga twins, Sazasha said, "You'd better get going, Hinata." Hanabi. Hinata looked a bit unsure. She also saw that Naruto was still on edge. "Don't worry about Naruto-kun. I'm going to stay the night with him tonight, and I'm sure Tintin wouldn't mind staying," Sazasha finished. Hinata and Hanabi looked at Sazasha for once with the same expression, trying to figure out what Sazasha was up to. They knew that they couldn't stay tonight with Naruto, because they would have half the clan looking for them before they could even get to sleep. It was one of the things that Hinata wasn't able to do. Tintin blushed a little at the idea of staying with Naruto. She knew that he practiced Henjutsu, and she had even taken a course on the subject when she found out he did and learned more on the subject. Her team didn't know that she had taken the course, but she knew that her teacher probably does, but didn't say anything about it. She was grateful for that. She had never really practiced the subject with Naruto, but she knew that it was only a matter of time. "Don't worry, Hinata-chan, I'm not going to steal your boyfriend. I'm just going to keep him company tonight with Tintin, if she wants to," Sazasha said. Tintin looked at Hinata and said, "I'll stay if it is all right with Hinata-chan." Hinata thought for a moment and said it was okay and walked up to Naruto and gave him a deep kiss saying goodnight. Hanabi said goodnight and left with her sister. This left Naruto, Tenten, and Saizasha in Naruto's apartment. Three hormonal teenage ninja going through puberty that have studied ninjutsu. What could possibly go wrong? Tenten and Saizasha made dinner while Naruto read more about his clan. Then they went to bed. Naruto got down to his boxers, which were black with little bowls of ramen on them. Tenten and Saizasha giggled at that. Saizasha striped down to a black bra and a black thong, and Tenten went to the same state of undress only with a white bra and thong. Naruto got a good look at them both and liked what he saw. Saizasha had an athletic build with a B-cup with a slim waist and hips that were just the right size for her body. With a black bra and thong on her pale skin, not as pale as Hinata's, made a good contrast. Tenten, on the other hand, had a plumper build with a C-cup with wide hips and legs that went on forever. Tenten's white bra and thong had the same contrast that Saizasha had, but Tenten had nicely tanned skin. Naruto knew it was going to be a long, difficult night. Viewed you Chapter 5. Naruto, now in his last year at the academy, was sitting in a seat in Irika-sensei's class in the middle of Hinata and Saizasha. Naruto tried to listen to his sensei. He really did, but it was so boring. He had so much fun in the last summer that sitting in class was just too mind-numbingly boring. They were reviewing what they had learned last year and what they were going to cover this year, and Naruto could say with no doubt in his mind that it was going to be a boring year. It was the last year of the academy, and they weren't going to cover any of the subjects that he liked. They weren't going to study fuujutsu, elemental manipulation, or ninjutsu. The only subject that he was going to enjoy this year was trap making, and even then there was probably little that he hadn't figured out through trial and error with his pranks. Now, ninjutsu, he could understand that there were classes on the subject that you could take after you graduated. He had heard from Tenten. Fuujutsu, on the other hand, was an incredibly useful art, and once you got just the basics down, you could at the very least not need to buy sealing scroll or explosive tags. Of course, Naruto thought a bit more on the subject. If they did, Naruto wouldn't be making as much money as he was making seals. The last one, elemental manipulation, only some of the clan kids knew about, and some in no real detail. It could be a bit of a dangerous practice. Only those with a wind affinity were in any real danger of getting ahead of themselves and getting hurt practicing a jutsu that was beyond them. It was going to be a boring year, and Naruto knew that he was going to be getting some more time to study some of his favorite subjects. If he played his cards right, and his luck held up, which it always did for some reason, he could be a high-class journeyman or a low-class seal master by the end of the school. It also gave Naruto time to work on his latest project. After school, Naruto and the girls went to their usual training ground and started to train. Yakumo was going to be training with them today. She had made some good strides in becoming a ninja. Her taijutsu had improved quite a bit, and her jinjutsu, on the other hand, had improved in leaps and bounds. With the help of her bloodline, she was able to make jinjutsu so powerful that it caused the victim to believe anything that happens to the victim within the jinjutsu physically harm their body. She had mostly fire-based jinjutsu and the creation of monsters that can't be easily dispelled. She did this by making the monsters double or sometimes triple layer jinjutsu, but she could only make 2 or 3 of the bigger ones of them at a time. It was a productive day of training with their little group. Hinata almost had the ball of water a meter out of the water, but the ball was unstable and would pop from time to time. Hinata was also working with Anko on learning the Hibi fighting style when it became apparent to Hinata that the Hyuga style was too rigid for her body. The Hibi style focused more on flexibility and solid strikes to vital areas. She was also looking at the Phantomu style, which was a purely defensive and evasion style. The Phantomu was one that Yakumo found and was practicing as it went great with Jinjutsu and her weaker-than-average body. Hanabi was also working on her element, but it was going slower for her as she could dry out the leaf, but she was having a problem grinding it to dust. Her taijutsu had improved quite a bit, and she was the best in their group at taijutsu. The Hyuga style just fit her body. Hanabi wasn't as flexible as Hinata. Sometimes she wonders if her sister is double or triple jointed, but she did have some, and she worked into the style when she could. Saizasha worked on the Kenjutsu style that the Uchiha used. It was a mix of a few styles and focuses on quick and accurate strikes through an opponent's defenses. She was making good progress with some pointers from Anko. She got the info from Yugao Yuzuki. Tintin wasn't there today, out on a few missions with her team, so that left Naruto and Yakumo to work together. They were doing mainly physical exercises, push-up, sit-ups, running, and sparring. They were sparring now. Naruto used a bastardized version of the strong fist. He used it in a loose stance where he was able to adapt to changes in the opponent's fighting, be it with taijutsu, ninjutsu, kenjutsu, and in the case of Yakumo, jinjutsu. Yakumo's jinjutsu was a bit different to others because she mainly used her fire and monster jinjutsu, and with those she used multiple layers jinjutsu. They can physically hurt Naruto, and he isn't that good with jinjutsu. With Yakumo, her jinjutsu monsters can be physically fought, but if you don't break the jutsu, they will just keep coming back. Naruto ran at Yakumo, who had one of her monsters in front of her. This one was about 4 feet tall and seemed to be covered in red-brown skin. It had no real head. What it had was more of a mound of flesh with a hole where the face would be. It had a thick body with hands that had 3-foot-long claws. And the Mumbler from the Silent Hill game, and yes, most of Yakumo's monsters will be from Silent Hill. Yakumo's monster went to defend her with a thrust of its claws. Naruto dodged left and punched the monster, but it didn't move much and took another swipe at Naruto. As Naruto was fighting her monster, Yakumo finished another set of hand signs. On the ground, all around her foot, long bugs that looked like moth larvae came into being from what looked like ash collecting. And the twin feeler from Silent Hill, just smaller. There's about 10 of them, and most of them went underground, and the rest went at Naruto. Naruto, seeing the new monsters, knew he had to get rid of the one he was fighting. Now, Naruto wasn't good at jinjutsu, but there was one thing he knew that could kill these monsters. Dodging another swipe from the first monster, he put his hands together in a praying motion, concentrated his chakra into what he imagined to be a sphere, and pulsed his chakra. Yakumo, knowing what Naruto was doing, had her monsters dodge, but the first one was not fast enough to get away and shattered like glass. The pulse was about 5 feet wide, and when it dissipated, she had her larva spit at Naruto, a purple liquid. Naruto charged Yakumo while dodging the liquid, but when he got loose, 3 larvae popped out of the ground in front of him and latched onto his legs, where the larvae were started to burn, and Naruto saw that the bugs were producing the same liquid that was being spit at him. He charged another pulse and shattered the bugs on his legs and a few globs of acid that were about to hit him. Yakumo was finishing another set of hand signs, and she used one of her fire jinjutsu, a wisp. 5 balls of fire about a foot wide appeared that looked like they had an eye in the middle and started to shoot balls of fire that were about the size of softballs. Naruto, seeing this, thought, I hate fighting long range. Dodging even more projectiles of fire and acid, he went through hand signs and called out wind style, blade bits. He swung his arms out, and 24 wind blades the size of razors shot off. They went through a few fireballs but didn't do anything and just passed through them. Naruto wasn't aiming at them because he knew fighting jinjutsu with ninjutsu was pointless. He was aiming at Yakumo. Yakumo, seeing the blades coming, weaved her way through them and only came out with a few shallow cuts. She ran to one of her wisps and held it in her hand. Naruto, seeing this, wondered what she was doing. She had never done that before. Yakumo concentrated on the wisp, and it began to change. The fire began to wrap around her hand and forearm. When she was done, her hands and forearm were covered in orange fire. She opened her hands, and there was an eye on each palm. She pointed her palm at Naruto and started to shoot fire at him herself. Naruto, seeing this, knew he had a bit of a problem. Yakumo's normal wisps had perfect aim, and with the speed at which they flew at someone, they were a bit difficult to dodge. But their prefect aim and their independent thinking was their weakness. They shot where you are not where you're going to be. The wisps weren't smart, All they knew is shot the target, but if you were fast enough, they would never hit you. Just keep you on your toes. The difference is now is Yakumo can think and will aim where Naruto is going to be when he dodges the other fireballs and acid. Naruto knew that he had to get rid of the bugs and the wisps. So he went to the bugs first. They were small, but they were slow. It only took Naruto a moment to get to the bugs and shatter them. He took out a few seals and said fuujutsu style, Hado 10, Kyukaku, sphere shells. And yes, I made this one up. The seals burned, and 24 purple balls of energy appeared. They began to fire 2 or 3 at a time at Yakumo to keep her from taking too many shots at Naruto. By the time they had all fire, Naruto had taken down 2 of the wisps, but the other 2 were in Yakumo's hands. She didn't want to lose them like the others, and she had one more thing to try. Naruto and Yakumo stared at each other, and Naruto said, "Your Jinjutsu is getting better." Yakumo smiled and said, "Yes, they are. My bloodline helps out a lot, but it comes with some side effects." Naruto looked a little confused and said, "What side effects?" Yakumo smiled and said, "You are about to find out." With that said, she concentrated on the 2 remaining wisps, and they began to flow up her arms. The fire became more defined than they were before. Before it was just fire going up her arms, but now they looked like armor and arm guards on her forearms and an armored shoulder caps with plates of armor going down to the elbow with an armored claw on her hands. Yakumo undid the braid in her hair, and that was when Naruto noticed another change. Her eyes were now a deep purple with what could only be described as insane glee in them. Yakumo looked at Naruto and smiled and said, "Are you going to play with me, Naruto-chan?" Naruto, now thoroughly confused at the near childlike voice she was speaking in, nodded, and that was all Yakumo needed. She charged at Naruto at a speed that he didn't know she had and tried to take off his head when a sword of fire formed where her hand was. Naruto ducked and hit her in the stomach, but all it did was knock her back when it should have done more than that. Naruto threw a pair of kunai at her with a chakra threading seal on them, making a net between them, and Naruto found out why the punch had little effect. Jinjutsu. Yakumo passed right through the net, still charging him. And at that moment, another Yakumo appeared behind him with a hand raised ready to slash at his back. Naruto ran forward at the Yakumo in front of him, charging a chakra pulse. The Yakumo behind him took the back of his jacket, exposing the chainmail under it. The Yakumo in front of him made no attempt to dodge and fired a thin stream of fire at him. Naruto's chakra pulsed and passed through the Yakumo, and nothing happened. He barely dodged the steam of fire and leaped back and looked at the 2 Yakumos in front of him, now more confused than ever. Both of the Yakumos smiled at his confusion, and one of the Yakumos said, "Confused Naruto-chan." Naruto nodded as he took off his jacket. "You see, Naruto-chan, one of us is a Jinjutsu, and one is not," the other Yakumo said. "I got that far, Yakumo, but I got the Jinjutsu," Naruto said. They both smiled and said together, "Are you sure, Naruto-chan? And there is something you should know. My name isn't Yakumo, it's Alessa." At that, they charged again. Naruto, still confused, took off at them. One of them grew their claws to 3 times their original size, and the other was shooting steams of fire at him. The clawed one got in close and took a few swipes at him, while the other covered any openings that the clawed one made. This went on for a few moments until Naruto got tired of it, and when the clawed one made slash up, and Naruto ducked low and hit her with all his might, knocking her back to the other one. Naruto took out a flash seal, closed his eyes, and set it off, and after he looked to see which Yakumo was blinded after the flash. Naruto took the chance and took out a shuriken with a wire on it and threw it at one as he charged another pulse while running at the second Yakumo. The second pulse worked, and Naruto quickly ran at the other one before she could get free. After catching Yakumo, or was it Alessa, she struggled a little before giving up and said, "Well, Naruto-chan, we're going to be with me now. Are you going to have your way with me?" "Well, for one, no, I'm not going to have my way with you. And can you explain to me what the hell that was?" Naruto said, still confused. Yakumo smiled and said, "Well, Naruto-chan, my name is Alessa, and I'm the other Yakumo." At Naruto's even more confused face, she explained, when someone from my clan uses our bloodline, we sometimes develop a second personality to help with the more complicated Jinjutsu. So when Yakumo started to focus only on Jinjutsu, I developed much quicker than normal. Not that I wasn't already on my way before. It would have just taken longer. So this is the side effect she was taking about. Naruto asked Alessa and nodded. That's a weird effect. Alessa shrugged and said, it may be weird, but hey, I'm not complaining. How did you dodge my first pulse? Naruto asked. I got Sasashi's help and made a seal that is on my wrists. It's a chakra storage seal, and with it I was able to learn Korimi no Jutsu, and it was a piece of cake to change places with my Jinjutsu clone, Alessa said. Naruto was surprised and asked, you can use Jutsu now. No, Naruto-chan, I can't. Just using Kawarimi no Jutsu puts my body in pain. Not that pain is a bad thing. My body isn't used to normal chakra, Alessa said. Naruto thought about that for a moment and nodded and asked, what do you mean that pain isn't a bad thing? Alessa smiled and said, pain is a normal part of life. The burning muscle of a hard day's workout, the pain after a good spar, and the pain of being spanked. Alessa's smile got bigger as she saw the blush that was now on Naruto, as he tried to say something, but Alessa answered before it could be asked. Yes, Naruto, me, and Yakumo like being in pain. You should come over to our house and see the stuff we have hidden under the floor in our closet. Naruto tried to get his blush under control and said, maybe later. Alessa looked happy when he said that and let Naruto untie her. It was a productive day of training, even with the fact that when Yakumo got back in control, she couldn't even look at Naruto knowing the conversation that he and Alessa had. It didn't compare to the embarrassment that she felt when Naruto said that all she needed to do was ask after they were done training. A month into the new year at school for Naruto and the girls at the academy, and they were looking forward to their ninja careers. There was one more thing that Naruto wanted to do for the girls before they got into the ninja world. Naruto was done with his neck seal, but he needed a little help putting it up. So one Friday, after school, Naruto got Hanabi and headed to an unused training field and got to work. Naruto needed a good hard surface to write on and a few other things for the seal to work. It took Hanabi a while, but she was able to get what Naruto needed done. At the end, they had a good hard surface to write on with 12 pillars coming out of the ground. The pillars were about 6 feet tall and were in 2 circles, one smaller than the other. In the middle of it was a pedestal that was round and about 5 feet across. Naruto knew it was going to take a while to get the seal done, so he got to work. It took Naruto about a day and a half to get the seals all down on the ground and on the pillars, but when he was done, it could be called a work of art. The seal consisted of 2 large circles that ran into all the pillars, with the pillars themselves having 3 lines of seals going up their sides. In the middle of the 2 seals, there was a circle, and on the other side, in the inner circle, there was another circle. The most complicated part of the seal was in the middle, where the seal spiraled out from the pedestal. When it was done, Naruto spent the rest of the day checking the seal for any mistakes. Finding none, he reactivated the security seals he set up the night before. They made the place where the seal was nearly invisible, and he also set up a few trap seals just to be safe. With that done, he went home and went to bed. The next day, Naruto met up with everyone: Sasasha, Hinata, Hanabi, Yakumo, and Tintin, and he even got Anko and Hana to come with him. When Anko saw Naruto, she brought him to her bosom with a smile. Now Naruto liked where he was, but he needed to breathe. Hi Anko-chan, how are you today? Naruto said. Anko smiled and said, well, hello Naruto-kun. Now I have a question, Naruto-kun. Naruto said, what? When are you going to practice some Hinjutsu with me? Anko asked. Naruto blushed at that and said, I think I need to practice a bit more before I practice with you. I'll go easy on you, Anko said. Naruto tried to ignore Anko and said hi to Hana and the Hammer brothers. Hana smiled and said hi. With the hellos out of the way, they went to the training ground so everyone could get a good look at the seal that Naruto made. But when they got there, they put on a pair of goggles and took a look at the seals. Someone was messing with my seals, Naruto said. This surprised everyone because only the girls and Naruto knew they were working here, and Anko said, "Did they get in?" "No, but not for a lack of trying," Naruto said as he deactivated the invisibility, and they saw what he meant. There was a crater on the ground, but the odd part about this crater was in a half circle like it had hit something. Naruto went up to the edge of the crater and taped on something. When he did, a dark blue dome came into view. They disabled the traps, but the barrier I set up was too much for them, and they weren't about to break it, even with force, Naruto said, pointing at the crater. Hana asked Naruto, "How good would they have to be able to break all your seals?" "Pretty good considering they couldn't see the seals because the invisibility seal is on the inside of the barrier. I only know of 2 ways to see the seals. The first is to have the goggles I made myself to see them, or the second is to have the Byakugan," Naruto said. Everyone looked at Hinata and Hanabi. Hanabi said, "It wasn't us. We didn't tell anyone." Anko thought for a moment and said, "Well, it looks like you're having someone spy on you." "Why would they want to spy on me?" Naruto asked. Anko looked at Naruto and said, "Naruto-kun sealers of your level are rare, and the seals you make can be very valuable to the right people." Naruto had to nod at that, as he was making a few $100,000 a month to make seals. Naruto decided that he would put more advanced security on his house when he got home. They all went up to the seal that was written on the ground, and Sazasha said, "Wow, Naruto, this has got to be the biggest seal you have ever made." Naruto smiled with a bit of pride and said, "Yep, this is the biggest, and I wanted to give you all a spirit of your own." "Really? How do we know they will like being summoned?" Hinata asked. "I made the seal to pick a spirit, depending on the chakra, and to pick a spirit that is bored and open-minded," Naruto said. "Cool. It's amazing what you can do with seals, Naruto-kun," Hanabi said. "Yaman Uzumaki, so it runs in my blood, I guess," Naruto said. "What does being an Uzumaki have to do with being good at seals?" Hinata asked as she came and hugged Naruto from behind. Well, the Uzumaki clan was a clan that specialized in seals. They were also known for a few other things like their massive reserves of chakra, the ability to heal nearly any wound that didn't kill them immediately, and their long lives, Naruto said. "Long lives?" Hinata asked. "Yeah. Even a citizen of the Uzumaki clan could live to well into their hundreds," Naruto said. "Being a ninja only lengthened their lives if they weren't killed in battle. It wasn't uncommon for an Uzumaki to live to see 200. That was why the Uzushiogakure village also has the name the Village of Longevity. So that's why you have the chakra and stamina to fight all 3 of us at the same time," Sazasha said, referring to herself, Hinata, and Hanabi. Naruto nodded and said, "Now that that's out of the way, let me explain the seal." He explained that all you have to do is pump your chakra into the small outermost circle, and the seal will do the rest. Hinata gave Naruto a kiss on the cheek and went to get a closer look at the seal. Sazasha came up in front of him and said, "Naruto-kun, can I get a kiss too?" Naruto blushed and said, "Sazasha, we have been over this. Hinata is my girlfriend." "That may not matter anymore if the Uzumaki clan has a bloodline," Sazasha said. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked. "Well, you're the last male of a clan with a bloodline, Naruto-kun. The council in their infinite wisdom may put you under the Clan Restoration Act," Sazasha said with sarcasm evident in her voice at the end. "What?" Hinata asked now that the conversation had her full attention. "Well, it means that Naruto may have to take more than one wife so that his clan will grow faster," Sazasha said. "The reason I know this is that I am the last female of a clan and have looked into it." Naruto, still reeling at the fact that he may have more than one wife, asked, "What did you find out about yourself?" "Well, if my brother, the last Uchiha, wasn't here, I would probably be used as breeding stock for my clan," Sazasha said. "The council has probably already brought it up in one of their meetings." Anko snorted and said, "Oh, you're right about that. but the Hokage has put a stop to anyone trying to, as he put it, court you. Sasasha, looking resigned at that, said, "That's a nice way of putting it." "What would happen if they did court you?" Naruto said. "I would probably have to have a child by the age of 16, and they would use me till I was no longer useful and throw me away," Sasasha said. "That's not right," Naruto said. "No, it's not, but most of the council doesn't care about that. All they care about is getting my clan's money and power," Sasasha said. "That's one of the reasons Sakura is in our class. She is the daughter of the head of the Citizens' Council, and has convinced her daughter that Sasuke is the best man in the world." Naruto thought about it for a moment and asked, "Does that mean that Ino is the same way?" Sasasha laughed at that and said, "No, she doesn't. I'm pretty good at reading people, and I think that Ino is only chasing Sasuke because Sakura is." "What do you mean?" Hanabi asked. "Well, Ino and Sakura used to be best friends. They used to play together all the time, but after Sakura started to chase my brother, Ino couldn't stand getting less attention from her best friend and also started to chase my brother. When that happened, Sakura decided not to be friends with her anymore, and they became rivals," Sasasha said. Everyone in the room thought about that for a moment, and Sasasha continued, "It probably wouldn't take much to get Ino to stop being a fangirl. Just a push in the right direction would get her on the path to being a real ninja. But that's something for another time. Well, now that that's out of the way, who wants to go first?" Naruto asked Chapter 6. "I'll go first," Anko said. Anko stepped into the seal on the ground and knelt in a small circle in between the two larger circles. She then started to channel chakra into the seal, and everyone saw two spherical barriers go up. She then started to channel chakra into the seal, and everyone saw two spherical barriers go up. One of the barriers on the outside most circle, and the other on the inside of the seal around the pedestal in the middle of the seal. On the pedestal, nothing seemed to happen for a moment, and then all the seals glowed and an orange light started to appear. Then all at once fire came out of the pedestal and a figure appeared. It looked to be a woman who seemed a little confused. She was obviously not human, however, as she was covered in fire, and what looked like black coals covering her red-orange skin along with a pair of small black horns to complete the demonic look. The creature of fire saw Anko and asked, "What am I doing here?" "Well, I summoned you here with the help of Naruto-chan over there," Anko said and pointed a thumb over her shoulder at Naruto. She continued, "My name is Anko, what's yours?" "Kusaburu." "Now, why would someone summon me?" Kusaburu asked. "It was more along the lines of a loosely guided summoning. Someone else could have been summoned, but the seal you're sitting in chose you," Anko said. Kusaburu looked down at the seal below the pedestal she was sitting on. How did he get an idea like this? He accidentally summoned a storm spirit a few months back and made a contract with it and thought it would be cool to get his friends some too. "So what are you, by the way?" Anko asked. "I'm an Ifrit, a race known to be beings of fire and always looking for power. If you're looking to make a contract with me, that may be a bit difficult, as I'm not a spirit like the last one that was summoned. I'm a being of flesh and blood," Kusaburu said, looking back at Anko. This got Anko to think for a moment and asked, "Well, what do you want to do?" Naruto-chan made this seal to pick summons that were bored and open-minded. "I may fall under those things, but I can never really stay in one place for a long time," Kusaburu replied. Anko looked at Kusaburu and asked, "Can you fight?" Kusaburu nodded and Anko continued, "Well, if you're good, you can come with me on my missions, but you may have to tone down the fire on stealth missions." Kusaburu took a few minutes to think on this one and said, "That's all right with me." And as for toning it down suddenly the fire began to recede from her form, and her skin went from red to the color of polished brass. Her horns sank into her head, and shoulder-length brown hair became visible without the flames obscuring the view. As the changes finished, she gave a slight grin at Anko. "How's this?" Anko nodded before she touched the inner dome and walked up to Kusaburu. She held out her hand, which Kusaburu took with a smile. The next one to go was Hanabi, and hers was relatively simple, as she summoned an earth spirit named Burakusitan and was easily able to make a contract. Hana went after her and got a wolf spirit named Tanamo. Saizasha went through the same process as the others and waited for her spirit to come. After a moment, and a flash of red light later, there was a fox in the pedestal just sitting on it lazily. It was a red fox with black ears, muzzle, paws, and the tip of its tail. It looked at the seals on the ground and the barrier around it, and then at Saizasha and said in a smooth but diffident male voice, "Hello there, little girl. How may I help you?" Saizasha was a bit irritated at being called a little girl, but ignored it and replied, "This seal was supposed to summon spirits, but from the feeling I'm getting from you, you aren't one." The fox gave a bit of toothy grin and said, "I could be considered a spirit as I am a kitsune and we are spirit beings. My name is Hikage. What can I call you, little girl?" "If it will stop you from calling me little girl, it's Saizasha," Saizasha said. "And I guess this summon is a bust as I'm not making a contract with a demon." The kitsune seemed to perk up at the mention of contract and said, "Now don't be so hasty here, Saizasha. I think we can come to a deal." "I'm not selling my soul to a demon," Saizasha shot back. "Now whoever said anything about selling a soul?" Hikage wheedled. "There are many things that can be bargained with." Now Saizasha is curious and asked, "Like what?" Hikage sat up a little straighter and said, "Well, there are a few things like some of your life, information, or from what I can feel I could take a bit of power from you." Saizasha narrowed her eyes and replied guardedly, "You aren't getting any of my life. As for the other two, what kind of information and what do you mean by taking my power?" "Well, that would be information like this seal I'm standing in, some memories of yours or other people I don't care much, or some books that could be of some use to me. As for power, when I'm around you, I will leech a bit of power from you, and I will even answer a few of the questions you may have about me, my kind, or some other people or other beings you may have." "That is if the price is right," Hikage answered. Saizasha thought about this for a moment and finally concluded, "I will have to think about this." "That's fine. If you come to me, I will give you something that will make it easier to get in contact with me," Hikage said. Saizasha narrowed her eyes and said, "How do I know you won't try to get me, or try to get out when I drop the barrier?" "I'll give you this bit of information for free. When a demon gives his word, he can't go back on it. I, Hikage, will only give you what you need to summon me, and I will not try to escape," Hikage promised. Saizasha thought about what he had said for a moment and decided to take a leap of faith in believing him. She touched the barrier and walked up to Hikage and asked, "What are you giving me?" "Hold out your hand," Hikage answered. Saizasha did so, and he bit into her forearm, but quickly let go. Saizasha pulled her arm back immediately and shouted, "What the hell?" She looked at her arm and saw the bite and the blood coming out of it. Hikage gave a toothy grin and said, "I did exactly what I said I would do. I didn't say I wouldn't hurt you. Now look at your arm." Saizasha looked from Hikage back to her arm and saw a mark starting to appear on it. There were 2 black rings around her forearm, and on top of her forearm was a circle that was over the rings with Hikage's name on it. "All you have to do to summon me is put a bit of blood and chakra into the circle." Saizasha looked back to Hikage and said, "Well, we're done here." And with a hand seal and a flash of light, he was gone back to where he came from. She went back to the others and Hinata, and Hana looked at the bite. Hana wrapped it and said it would be fine, 9. Now it was Hinata's turn, and she got into the seal and put her chakra into it. Then there was a flash of white. When the light was gone, no one was there on the pedestal. Instead, there was what looks like an egg, about the size of chicken egg, just sitting there. The spirits that were there almost had a heart attack at what this young lady just summoned. "Did she just summon what I think she did?" Byurakusitan asked Tanamo. Tanamo nodded his head and replied faintly, "I think so." Naruto turned to the spirits and asked, "What did she summon?" Byurakusitan looked at Naruto and said, "I think Hinata-san just summoned an angel egg." Everyone looked surprised at this, and Naruto asked, "What's an angel egg?" Tanamo answered, "It's something that helps a goddess control their abilities and use some of their more complex spells. Hinata is beautiful and all but a goddess." Naruto half asked, half stated, letting the sentence linger. The 2 spirits nodded, and Naruto went on and finally asked, "What does this mean?" It means that your friend there is innocent enough for an angel egg to pick her to bond with, Tanamu said. They all looked back at Hinata. On the inside of the barrier, Hinata couldn't hear the people and spirits on the outside of the seal. Hinata saw the egg on the pedestal and turned on her Byakugan to see if there was anything else in the seal. She almost immediately turned it off because of the bright light coming from the egg. She blinked the spots from her eyes and thought about what to do. The moment that her Byakugan was on, she did see that the egg was the only thing in the seal. Hinata touched the inside barrier to dissolve it, and she went up to the egg and picked it up. She held it in her hand and felt that it was warm to the touch. She looked at it closer and felt it move a little and saw it start to crack. Then the egg burst open and a light flew into Hinata's chest. Almost immediately, Hinata was on her hands and knees in pain, and the barrier around the seal broke. Naruto was at her side in a moment and tried to see what just happened. What happened? Naruto asked Byakugan and Tanamu when he couldn't find anything wrong. The angel is bonding with her. It will be a bit of a painful process, but it will pass when the egg settles in, Byakugan answered. Naruto and everyone there looked back at Hinata and saw a bulge on her back, and Naruto ripped open the back of Hinata's shirt. They saw just above Hinata's bra, skin going up in an unnatural way with a ball of light in the middle. Then there was a flash of light that everyone shielded their eyes from. Looking back at Hinata, they saw that she was no longer in pain, but was breathing a little heavy, but that wasn't what everyone was looking at. They were looking at what looked like a small person on Hinata's back. It was a girl that was the size of a small baby, but still looked like a full-grown woman. The little woman had long blonde hair and blue eyes, and for some reason, only one white angel wing. The little woman looked at everyone with a smile and waved at them. She then saw that Hinata was in pain and looked a little sad and put a comforting hand on Hinata's shoulder. Naruto got a little closer and asked Hinata if she was okay. Hinata nodded and said, "Yes, give me a moment." "Okay, Hinata-chan, but just so you know, there's a little woman on your back," Naruto said. Hinata smiled at that and said, "Yes, I know, and I just got a lot of information at one time, and I need a moment to sort out. Her name is Cool Mint, by the way." After a moment, Hinata gathered herself up with a deep breath and looked at the small angel on her back. Cool Mint gave Hinata a smile when she saw that she was okay, and Hinata smiled back. Hinata got up and looked at everyone and gave everyone a smile to show that she was okay. Hanabi asked, "So what did you learn?" "A lot, and it will take me a while to sort through all the information, but I got the basics on angels and goddesses. I just can't believe that I summoned a real angel," Hinata said. Naruto smiled and said while hugging her, "Why not? You're my little angel, Hinata-chan." Hinata blushed and didn't say anything, just snuggled into Naruto's chest. After moving Hinata out of the circle, they continued with the summoning. Tintin went after Hinata and got a thunder spirit named Sudaraiki. Things got interesting again at Yakumo's summoning. She went through the summoning process and a black and red light came through. When the light died down, there was a young woman there, sitting on the pedestal. The young woman had light brown skin, a pair of DD breasts with shoulder-length white hair, and what looked like two small wings that were black near the top fading to red at the bottom. She had on a thin, dark red nightgown that was nearly see-through and left nothing to the imagination, with knee-high dark red stockings. The woman looked at Yakumo, who was blushing at what the woman was wearing, and said with a smile, "Hello, my name is Sadesna. How may I help you today?" Yakumo answered, Well, Sadesna, me and my friends were summoning spirits to help us train, but I don't think you can help me in those clothes." Sadesna looked at her clothes and waved her hand, and suddenly she was wearing a red kimono before she said, "What would you want help with?" Yakumo lost her blush and said, "Well, I would like help with my jinjutsu." Sadesna tilted her head and Yakumo explained the illusion arts. Sadesna smiled at that and said, "If it's illusions, then you came to the right succubus. The price isn't too high either." Yakumo thought that her being a succubus explained the nightgown she had on and asked, "What price and what can you do?" Sadesna answered, "Well, all succubuses can perform illusions, It's how we hide our appearance and feed if we don't want to sleep with our chosen meal. We perform illusions mainly two ways, as she said that a tail that until this point hadn't been seen showed itself. We can use our tail, as she said that a spade at the end of her tail opened. All we have to do is put this on any part of the body and we can make our meals have wet dreams. Or the more powerful succubi can do the same thing and much more by just looking at someone. As for the price, all I want is for you to gather some food for me. Yakumo frowned at that and asked how. Sadesna answered, I will teach you how to collect it through performing sexual acts. She laughed at Yakumo, doing an excellent impression of a tomato. Don't be so shy, honey. I can see the lust coming off of you right now. You can see lust? Yakumo asked, still embarrassed. Oh yes, I can see the emotions you are giving off in waves, Sadesna said. She could see that Yakumo lusted after and had quite a bit of affection for a person, and that wasn't all. She could also see that the teen had trust in this person bordering on obedience. Sadesna looked at the people outside the barrier that she was in and saw the boy. No, young man that had the girl's attention, and from what she could see, he also had the attention of all the young women present. It wouldn't be too hard to teach you how to collect lust, and it will get you closer to that young man over there, Sadesna said, looking back at Yakumo. To Yakumo, it was a tempting offer, but she had one more question for Sadesna and asked, if I say yes, can you teach me to see emotions and cast illusions with only a look? Of course I can. It will cost you extra, but it can be done, Sadesna answered. Yakumo nodded her head and said, you have a deal. Sadesna smiled a little larger, showing perfect white teeth, and said, then come here, young lady. Yakumo dissolved the inner barrier and walked forward to the succubus. Sadesna put a hand on Yakumo's chin and tilted her head up, and when their eyes met, Yakumo felt a rush of information. Sadesna moved her head forward to catch the distracted Yakumo in a deep kiss. Yakumo came to her senses a few moments later and all but leaped away. Why did you do that? Yakumo all but shouted. Sadesna smiled and said, I was just getting you started. Yakumo was about to ask what she meant when it hit her. Her heart beat a little faster and she was getting a little hot. Sadesna continued, you can take care of that yourself and collect the lust off yourself, but you'll get a lot more if you ask for a little help. With that said, Sadesna left with a giggle and a burst of red light. With that, the rest of the seal fell, and everyone asked if she was all right, and she said that she was fine. With everyone having their own summon, they all left to get to know their new friend. The last two in the field were Naruto and Yakumo. Naruto was getting rid of the seal on the ground, and Yakumo was having an inner debate with herself. But it was getting hard because she was still getting hotter, and it was getting unbearable. It was just getting worse as she was so close to Naruto, and she knew he could give her what she needed. It eventually became too much, and when Naruto was done dismantling the seal, Yakumo told Naruto what she needed and why. Not that she needed the why. Naruto would have been happy to help. I mean, what teen wouldn't? And he would be able to see what she hid in the floor in her closet. It turned into one of the greatest nights and morning of Yakumo's life. Ino was having one of the weirdest few weeks of her life. She had no reason for why, but she was now paying attention to Naruto, and she saw that he was a lot closer to the girls than she thought. It wasn't anything big at first, just training and sparring together, but one day she followed Naruto after school and saw that it was more than that. Naruto would take the girls he hung out with on what looked like dates, and not just to Ichiraka Ramen. They would go there sometimes, but also to much fancier restaurants as well. Ino also found out that he even had more friends outside their class, people who were already ninja, and one of them she knew, Anko. Anko is not a woman that Ino thought any sane person would just hang out with. Ino first thought maybe Naruto was going out with all of them, and that none of them had figured it out yet, and that was a story that Ino would love to spread. That idea was shot out of the sky when the next day Naruto went out with most of them after school shopping. It was Naruto with Saizasha, Hanabi, Hinata, a girl named Yakumo, and a girl named Tenten. To Ino, it would have been a normal day of shopping, looking at shirts, shorts, pants, and other sort of things. Ino had tricked Choji and Shikamaru into taking her shopping more than once, and Ino was sure that Naruto was bored out of his mind. But he stuck with them and even paid for all the clothes that they got. That was another mystery. How in the world did Naruto have enough money to take 5 girls out shopping? They weren't just buying the cheap stuff after all. It was at the last stop that Ino finally figured it out why Naruto had not gone insane with boredom. He was just waiting for the last shop on the trip, a store that Ino would never take Choji or Shikamaru to, a lingerie store. Ino was shocked when the store clerk not only gave him a pleasant greeting, but guided him and the rest of the group right into the changing area, and Naruto went where no other guy should go, the women's changing rooms. Ino walked up to the manager of the store and asked, "How come you let a guy into the women's changing rooms with no fuss?" The manager, an older woman that Ino was pretty sure was also the owner, answered, "Oh, that group come in here every once in a while. The first time I said that a young man shouldn't come back there, but the girl said it was fine. I still insisted that they may be fine with it, but the other customers wouldn't. Then one of the girls brought up the point that with all of them, only one room was left open, so it was basically just them. I let it go then because they had a point." Ino looked back at the changing room and then to the manager and said, "Can I try something on?" The manager looked at Ino and asked if she was sure she was comfortable with the boy being in there. Ino nodded and went to the changing rooms. She did a quick hinge and went in. The next 10 minutes will be forever burnt into her mind. The girl seemed to not notice her, and Naruto was far too distracted to take note of her. The girls were trying on all sorts of things from teddies to frilly bras to thongs. Ino might as well have been taking notes as they were in their own world. Saizasha seemed to like the darker colors and was never seen in anything but a thong. Hanabi was going for the skimpy look and wore as little as possible while still being somewhat dressed, and she also liked the see-through teddy. It was one of the ways that Hanabi had found that skimpy or flashy clothes really pissed off the elders in her clan. Hinata was more modest, but was not one to be outdone, and because of her flexibility, she had to be in a thong. Anything else just got in the way. Yakumo seemed to like leather, and Tintin seemed to like things with a string, which was why she was in a corset. What was Naruto doing in this personal striptease? He was just basking in it, giving a comment here and there. What shocked Ino was that they all let him touch. It wasn't anywhere too personal, just the girl's sides, stomach, and thighs. On top of that, the changing area seemed to be getting hotter, so Ino got out of there quickly. It took Ino a week to get up the nerve to follow Naruto again. Thank Kami, they weren't shopping. They were just having some sparring matches. When watching those matches, she noted something they were holding back in class. They never moved that fast in class or gave any indication that they could use elemental chakra. It was a few hours before they stopped sparring, and Ino was glad because she had to get home soon. Ino thought that they all were going to go home, but only Hinata and Hanabi left while Naruto and Saizasha stayed in the clearing. "So, Saizasha, the usual?" Naruto asked. Let's go a bit further than that," Saizasha said with a smile. Naruto smiled back and said, "As you wish." He took out a scroll, and with a puff of smoke, there was a mat with a futon on the ground. Ino was wondering what they were doing when Saizasha took off her top, leaving her in a black bra. Ino nearly fell out of the tree that she was in when the bra came off too. Ino looked to Naruto to see that he wasn't embarrassed in the least. When she looked back at Saizasha, she saw that she had taken her shoes off and was pulling down her pants. Ino was now seeing Saizasha basically nude in front of her. Saizasha had a solid B cup with dark pink nipples. Ino looked down Saizasha's body and didn't find a single flaw. Saizasha had a top perfectly sized, but in long legs. Every part of her had toned muscle and fat in all the right places. Naruto unzipped his jacket and took it off along with the chainmail he had on. Ino's mouth fell open at what she saw. Naruto didn't have an ounce of fat on his upper body. He also had defined arms and chest with the beginnings of six-pack. Saizasha laid face down on the futon with only a black thong on. "You are always more open than Hinata or the others are," Naruto commented. "They always wear a bathing suit." "That's not that surprising," Saizasha said. "Hinata already is a C-cup at 13 and is a bit embarrassed about it and how fast her body is developing." "Only a bit?" Naruto asked playfully while starting to give the massage. "Okay, very embarrassed about it, which is why she always wears those coats to hide it in public," Saizasha said. "Hanabi, on the other hand, is holding back a little because her sister loves you and she doesn't want to get in the way." Naruto nodded and said, I figured. Hanabi is at a small C-cup and only a little bit behind Hinata." "Let's talk more massage," Saizasha said. Ino was in shell shock at the conversation that just took place. He does this with all the girls he hangs out with. Hinata has admitted her crush on Naruto to him? How far have they gone with each other? Ino was brought out of her thoughts when Saizasha moaned as Naruto worked on her inner thigh. Ino watched as Naruto worked Saizasha like an instrument. The noise Saizasha was making would be music to any guy's ears. Naruto stopped and said, "I'm done with this side, Saizasha." Saizasha turned over with a smile, and Naruto worked from the bottom up. As Ino watched Naruto worked Saizasha's body like a pro, and Ino could have sworn Naruto rubbed Saizasha's thong-covered pussy. Naruto continued to work up her body, working her stomach, ran his hands on the sides of her breasts, worked her arms and shoulders. Ino thought they were done when Naruto asked, "May I continue?" Saizasha's smile grew as she nodded, and Naruto started to knead her breasts. Saizasha started to moan as Naruto started to suck on her breast and pinching her other nipple. Naruto's other hand worked down her body and slid the thong down her legs. Ino at this point was starting to work her own body. Ino watched as Naruto spread Saizasha's legs and stroked her pussy. Saizasha's moans got louder, and Ino started to stroke herself through her panties while biting her lip to stop herself from moaning. Naruto worked his index and middle finger in and out of Saizasha's pussy as he kissed his way down her body. When he got to her pussy, he removed his fingers and started to lick her. Saizasha moaned louder and nearly came when Naruto started to nibble on her clit. Ino was watching all this in her tree, working herself furiously. She was at this point imagining taking Saizasha's place. Ino was biting her lip so hard she nearly made it bleed. She was whimpering and letting out soft moans despite her best effort. Her attention was brought back to Saizasha as she let out a mild scream. Naruto got out from between Saizasha's leg, licking the juices off his hand and face, said, "Well, that was fun." After catching her breath, Saizasha said, "Well, we could have more fun with our new friend." Naruto asked, "Are you sure? We don't know her that well." "I'm sure it's fine," Saizasha said. She seemed to be enjoying herself. Naruto shrugged, took out a kunai with a thread on it, and threw it into the tree. He pulled the string back to himself with Ino coming along. Saizasha looked at Ino and asked teasingly, My, Ino, did you enjoy the show?" Ino tried to deny that she was watching, but nothing came out. Naruto came over to her and picked up Ino's hand. Her fingers were covered in a clear liquid. "Yes, Ino, I think you did," Naruto said with a smile. Ino looked away from him with a blush on her face, and Naruto brought the hand to him and licked off the liquid slowly. Ino's face got redder with every lick. "You don't taste bad, Ino," Naruto said. "Would you like me to finish where you left off?" Ino looked at Naruto in shock at the question and asked, "How can you ask someone that?" Naruto shrugged and said, "The 5 people I've asked all said yes." "5 people?" Ino asked, shocked. "Yes, Ino, Naruto is good at what he does and always makes sure his partner is satisfied," Saizasha said. "But that's not right, Saizasha. Are you okay with him having more than one girlfriend?" Ino asked. Saizasha giggled and answered, "Naruto only has one girlfriend. The rest of us are just friends with benefits. If he wanted all of us as his girlfriends at the same time, none of us would have a problem with it." Naruto has enough stamina to go a few rounds with all of us at the same time and still be ready for more. There's no way he can do that, Ino said. You will be surprised at what I can do, Ino. I've got a lot of stamina and can recover very quickly. I could demonstrate if you want me to, Naruto said. Ow, Ino asked. Well, I could call Hinata and Hanabi back here and screw them and Sasasha into the ground, Naruto said. All my girls love how I treat and pamper them. They would come back here without a second thought. How can you say that, Naruto? Ino asked. You're just using them. Ino, that's not the case at all, Sasasha said. He only goes as far as we want him to. You heard him ask me if he could continue earlier, and if I said no, he would have stopped. If you need more proof that Naruto isn't using us, look at his pants. Ino looked and blushed at seeing Naruto at full mast in his pants. Sasasha continued. He hasn't asked me to satisfy him even after he satisfied me. If anything, Ino were using him to relieve stress, and he asks for nothing in return, no matter how much he wants to, and that thing looks painful. But that's not right, Ino said. Ino, would you let me continue if I was a girl? Naruto asked. Ino looked at Naruto in confusion and said, maybe, but you aren't. Naruto put his hands into the ram seal, and there was a puff of smoke. When the smoke cleared, Ino saw a female Naruto in all her glory. She had a B-cup and pink nipples on her perky breasts. Naruto smiled at the shocked look on Ino's face. That's just a hinge, Ino said. Touch me, Ino, Naruto said. If it is a hinge, then it will pop as soon as you do. Ino reached out her hand to what she believed was Naruto's male chest, instead grabbed a hand full of Naruto's very female chest. Naruto let out a low moan, and Ino nearly jumped out of her skin. That's not possible, Ino stated, eyes wide with shock. Naruto smiled and said, nothing's impossible if you work for it, Ino. This is a jutsu I made because I wanted to know what I would look like as a girl. According to what Hana found out about this jutsu, it suppresses all the male chromosomes in my body and turns me into a real girl. So you're really a girl right now, Ino said, and Naruto nodded. What else does it do? Well, what I've learned by being like this is that it brings out suppressed emotions to the front of my mind, and I have less self-control. So when I'm like this, I need to get one of the girls to help satisfy me, because as you can imagine, I have a lot of suppressed lust, Naruto said. Like right now, my pussy is soaked and the juices are running down my legs. Naruto put her hand on Ino's face, which made Ino blush harder. Naruto smiled and kissed her. Ino's eyes opened wide in shock at the femme Naruto kissing her. Naruto licked Ino's lips, silently asking her to open up, and Ino just went into autopilot. When Naruto pulled back, he looked at Ino, who had a glaze-over look on her face from the deep kiss, and asked, Ino, are you bisexual? Ino got a shy look on her face and nodded her head. Well, thank you for your honesty, Naruto said. Most girls, even if they were, wouldn't admit it. May I continue? And keep in mind, if you say no, I'm just going to play with Sasasha in front of you. A blushing Ino thought for a moment. If she stays like this, I won't lose my virginity, and he will satisfy me. Hi. Naruto smiled and kissed Ino again while unbuttoning her shirt. Naruto started to suck on Ino's neck as he kneaded Ino's breasts through her bra. Ino had a solid A cup for what Naruto could feel. Naruto took off Ino's shirt and bra before he began to cut off the bindings around her stomach with a kunai. Naruto rubbed Ino's sides and felt nothing but skin and bone. Ino, you should eat more, you're nothing but skin and bone. What? I don't want to get fat, Ino said. Well, Ino, that's the great thing about us kunoichi, Sasasha said. If we train, all the fat goes to the right places, and you also gain more muscle than fat, as she said that she moved behind Ino and started to rub her sides. Women are supposed to have 11% body fat, at minimum, to be healthy. I don't want to get too muscular either, Ino said. Do I look muscular, Ino? Sasasha asked. Ino shook her head no, and Sasasha continued. If you don't try to get too muscular, you won't. You'll just be toned like I am. Ino said that she would think about it, and with that, Naruto started to suck Ino's breast and nip it a little. Ino gave a whimpered moan in response. Saizasha lifted Ino's skirt and started to rub her pussy through her wrappings and panties. Ino moaned louder and was getting wetter by the moment. It didn't take long before Ino moaned loudly as she came. My. Ino, I think you may have just ruined your panties, Saizasha said as she held up her hand to Ino's face and continued. Could you clean this up for me, Ino? Ino, still in her orgasmic high, began to lick and suck her juices off Saizasha's fingers. When Ino came down off her high, she couldn't blush harder at what she was doing. Did you enjoy that, Ino? Naruto asked. Ino nodded, still embarrassed about finding out what she tasted like. Well, Ino, we're just getting started. An hour later, they were all laying on the futon Naruto had laid out earlier. It was a little small, but Ino and Saizasha were nearly lying on top of Naruto, so it was fine. Ino's mind was just coming back into focus, and Saizasha had a very satisfied look on her face. Well, Ino, I hope that you think about training, and come find us if you need some help or just need to get out some stress, Naruto said. Sure, Naruto-kun, but I'm tired, so just lay where you are, Ino said as she snuggled into Naruto's right breast. Naruto giggled and ran his hand through her long hair, the ponytail undone a while ago, and along her back. Well, this is nice and all, but I think we should get dressed before some random ninja runs through the training ground, Saizasha said. She got up and stretched while grabbing her clothes. Ino stretched a little and said, I guess you're right. My dad is probably wondering where I am. Naruto got up from under Ino and gave her a kiss on the head. He put his underwear and pants back on, and with a puff of smoke, he was male again, and they all finished getting dressed and headed home. When Ino got home, she saw her father in the living room relaxing after a council meeting. He looked up and hesitated a moment before he asked, What happened to your bindings, honey? He gave a slight nod to her bared stomach to show his meaning, reminding her that they had been cut off by Naruto earlier. I was training with some friends, and they got ripped up, so I took them off, Ino said. Oh, he asked, raising an eyebrow. Saizasha Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki, and they pointed something out to me during training. Dad, don't I eat enough? Ino asked. Her father was surprised at this and said, Well, if you were to train more, you would need to eat more of a balanced diet to help you recover faster and build muscle. Well, I'm going to train more because Saizasha wore me out today without breaking a sweat, Ino said. Can you help me? He smiles at his daughter, taking her training a bit more seriously, and said, I'd love to. Chapter 7. With the help of her father, Ino was able to gain a few pounds over the next few months and started to train with everyone. While training with everyone, she got to meet Anko a bit more often and started to learn from her. Ino took to learning the Hibi fighting style and a few other things from Anko, like poisons, antidotes, hinjutsu, and, since Ino was a Yamanaka, some interrogation. That last one gave Ino a good look at the darker side of being a ninja. She also found out that she had the same elemental affinity as Naruto, wind. When Ino found this out, she was surprised. Most of her clan had water and earth affinities. So she also started to work on the control exercises for wind, but that was going as fast as expected. Ino was a bit discouraged when she found out how far ahead the others were. They could probably take out a Chunin one-on-one, and all of them could give Anko a workout. So after Ino got the gravity seal, she started to work with the group more to try to catch up. The rest of the group got a better grasp of their elements. They hadn't mastered their elements, but they had control that most Chunin would be proud of. Naruto and Saizasha even started to work with a second element, water for Naruto and wind for Saizasha. Hinata, with the help of her angel Cool Mint, was starting to learn the celestial tongue, but that was extremely difficult. Just saying a few words would exhaust a person. Her angel said it would get easier with time, and once Hinata learned her true name. Another thing that she learned to do was to see the soul of a person. In the beginning, it was just the size of someone's soul, but as she worked at it, she was able to see different characteristics. Like if a person was good or bad, and with a bit of concentration, she was able to tell if that person is lying or not. It also worked as a sensory ability outside of the Byakugan, as she could see a soul much further than her Byakugan, with no waste of chakra. Yakumo, over the next few months, was able to work with Naruto in collecting lust to start learning from her new friend Sadesna. The first thing they worked on was casting Jinjutsu with just a touch. She was getting that easy enough, but if she wanted to learn to cast with just a look, she would have to collect a lot more lust. Hanabi worked with her spirit and was able to modify a few earth jutsu, like making the stone gauntlet from 3 inches of stone covering her hands and forearms to about half an inch with the same amount of stone. She was also able to use stone skin with just one hand seal. Tintin was working with her spirit and was able to magnetize some of her weapons, and she was working on controlling them in the air. She was also continuing to work with Naruto on her kenjutsu. The academy was the same as ever, and Naruto couldn't be more bored if he tried. At least it was a free period right now, or Naruto may have had to do something drastic. Like the time that Naruto was able to put a water balloon launcher on the ceiling and launch balloons filled with paint at Iruka. Or the time that he was able to get a pair of cat ear and tail on Mizuki that matched his hair color and wouldn't come off till the end of the day. Naruto looked around at what the girls were doing. Ino was reading a ceiling book that Naruto had given her, just the basics. Saizasha was playing the violin. Iruka didn't mind her playing, as every ninja needs a hobby. Hanabi was just thinking to herself, and Hinata was reviewing the classwork. "This is so boring," Naruto said. Saizasha smiled and put down her violin that she was playing and said, "If they were teaching seals or hinjutsu, you would be interested in class." Naruto grinned at that and said, "I could teach those classes." Hanabi rolled her eyes. "You probably could, but there's no need to stroke your ego." "Why don't they? Fuujutsu. I don't think they would teach anyone hinjutsu before you graduate," Ino said as she read the book in her hand. "I don't know. How about we ask Iruka?" Naruto said as he raised his hand. "Yes, Naruto," Iruka said. "Why don't we study seals in the academy?" Naruto asked. "Well, the council took it out of the curriculum about 10 years ago. Said the art was too difficult for students to learn," Iruka said. Ino looked up and said, "Really, I have a book for beginners and the basics are simple enough. As long as you know the basics, you can make your own sealing scrolls and explosive tags." "That may be Ino, but the council has a say in what we teach in the academy," Iruka said. "Which council? The citizens or the ninja council?" Saizasha said. "Both," Iruka said. "Why does the citizens council have any say in the academy?" Naruto asked. "I'm friends with older ninja, and the standards back when they were in the academy were higher." "They were, but the Citizens Council has gotten more power over the last 10 or 15 years," Iruka said. "Who are the ninja you have talked to?" "Anko Mitarashi and Hana Inazuka," Naruto said. "You know my sister?" Kiba asked, surprised. "Yeah, she's a great sparring partner, and the Harmura brothers seem to like me too," Naruto said. "Who are the Harmura brothers?" Sakura asked. "My sister's partners like Akamaru and me, but she has 3 partners," Kiba said. "Back on what we were talking about, why the academy doesn't teach at least the basics of all the ninja arts," Naruto asked. "Other than seal, we do teach the other arts, Naruto," Iruka said. "Not really, Iruka-sensei. You don't teach how to make or counter poisons. What elemental chakra is medical ninjutsu, and I bet not even half of the students in this class even know what hinjutsu is," Saizasha said. Iruka blushes at the last one and said, "I don't think that last one is a subject that I can teach in the academy, Saizasha." "I'll give you that one, but the other ones could be taught," Saizasha said. "What is hinjutsu?" Sakura asked. "Hinjutsu is the art of seduction." "Naruto, do you have a scroll on it on you?" Saizasha asked, looking to Naruto. Most of the students were surprised at what hinjutsu was and were now looking at Naruto, wondering why Saizasha would ask him for a scroll on seduction. "Let me look," Naruto said as he took out a scroll, and with a poof there were 10 scrolls on his desk. He looked through them and picked up one and tossed it to Sasasha. "That is a scroll on the basics," Naruto said. Sakura furrowed her brow and asked, "Naruto, were all these scrolls on Henjutsu?" "Yep," Naruto said. "Why do you have them?" Sakura said. "I stumbled onto the subject by accident and found it interesting. So I read up on it in my free time," Naruto said. "Wait, do you practice that subject?" Kiba asked. Naruto gave Kiba a grin and said, "Like I said, Hana makes a great sparring partner." "What? You seduced my sister?" Kiba all but screamed. Naruto rolled his eyes and said, "No, I'm still getting to know the female body, but I can give a killer massage." Kiba settled down a little at that and said, "You better not." "Or what, Kiba?" "You'll stop me," Naruto said. "Hana's a big girl and can make her own decisions." Kiba growled at Naruto, and Hanabi said, "That, and you love the way she looks in a thong." Kiba pounded on his desk and said, "What have you done with my sister?" Naruto rolled his eyes again and said, "Calm down, Kiba. To give a good massage, you have to work with bare skin. I always ask if she's okay with something before I start." Kiba still growled at him. Getting back on topic, Sasasha said, "Irika could give a few lessons on poisons. What elemental chakra is medical ninjutsu?" Irika sighed and said, "I will run it by the council, and if they give me the go-ahead, I will. So go back to studying quietly." The class listened and went back to looking at their books or whatever they were doing with the exception of Kiba and Naruto. Kiba was still glaring at Naruto, and Naruto was happy that they may have some more interesting classes soon. It was Sunday morning in the training ground, and as the sun began to raise, two people walked onto the training ground. The first one was Naruto, but he had a change of clothes. He had on a dark blue sleeveless shirt with a dark orange X on it that goes from shoulders to hips, and it had the Uzumaki swirl on the back of it. He also had dark blue pants and a dark orange strip on the side. The biggest change was that he had on a pair of blue gauntlets on his hands that nearly went up to his elbow. The other person that came into the training ground was Sasasha. She had on her normal clothes on, a black shirt and pants with red trim and the Uchiha emblem on the right side of her chest. The new things were the pair of black gloves she was wearing and the sword she had at her side. The sword had no guard, and the handle and sheath were made of a dark redwood. Sasasha took a deep breath and said, "Got to love the morning air." Naruto smiled and said, "Yeah, but we aren't here for the morning air." Sasasha's smile was a bit like that of a predator seeing its prey and said, "It has been a while since we could go all out, hasn't it? Hinata would never try to hurt me. Tintin is a long-range fighter. She's getting better with her sword, and I can blow all her weapons out of the air. Hanabi is a good taijutsu fighter and is getting better at earth style, and Yakumo is good if I want to practice breaking jinjutsu. You, on the other hand, have all of those, made not at the same level as they do, and you're the one that can give me the best challenge," Naruto said. Sasasha's smile got bigger and said, "You sure know how to flatter a girl." Naruto got into a loose stance and said, "It's one of the perks of studying Henjutsu. You don't stick your foot in your mouth as often." Sasasha got into the Uchiha fighting stance and said, "You still put your foot in your mouth every so often, but that is some of the charm about you, Naruto-kun."